A widow with two starving children, a rancher who trusts no one, and a winter that could kill them all. When Mercy Hollow stepped off that stagecoach into the freezing wasteland, she had nothing, no money, no home, and a daughter who hadn't spoken since watching her father die. The hard-eyed cattleman who owned the only shelter for 100 miles made it clear she wasn't welcome. But Mercy didn't come to the frontier to beg. She came to survive. And before the brutal winter ended, this broken woman would become the one thing that could save them all, or watch everything burn. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in the middle of absolutely nothing. Mercy Hollow pressed her face against the dust-covered window and felt her stomach drop. There was no town, no buildings, just endless brown prairie stretching in every direction under a sky so big it made her feel like an insect about to be crushed. "This can't be right," she whispered. The driver's voice came harsh through the wall. "Vane Ranch, end of the line, ma'am." "But there's nothing here." "Not my problem." He was already climbing down, boots hitting the dirt with finality. Mercy looked at her children squeezed beside her on the narrow bench. Noah clutched the wooden horse his father had carved, knuckles white around it like it might disappear if he let go. He was 7 years old and hadn't smiled in 4 months. Eliza sat perfectly still the way she always did now, staring at nothing with those huge dark eyes that used to be full of light. 9 years old, and she hadn't spoken a single word since the day they buried her father in the frozen Pennsylvania ground. The door jerked open and cold air slammed into them. "You getting out or what?" The driver stood there looking annoyed, like they were keeping him from something important. Mercy forced herself to move. Her legs shook as she climbed down. The wind hit her immediately, cutting through her thin coat like it wasn't even there. Noah stumbled out behind her, then Eliza, moving slow like she was walking through deep water. Their trunk landed in the dirt with a crack. The driver didn't even look at them as he climbed back up. "Wait," Mercy started, but the stagecoach was already rolling away, wheels kicking up dust that stuck in her throat. She watched it disappear into the distance until it was just a dark spot, then nothing at all. They stood there alone in the middle of nowhere. The wind made a sound like something crying. "Mama?" Noah's voice was tiny. Mercy looked down at the broken trunk, at her children shivering in their too small coats, at the empty landscape that seemed to go on forever. The ranch was supposed to be here somewhere. The letter had said Callum Vane would provide shelter in exchange for work. It was the only option she'd had after the funeral, after the landlord threw them out, after every single door in Pittsburgh slammed in her face. A widow with 2 children and no skills worth paying for. That's what they'd called her, like she was already a ghost. "There." Eliza lifted one small hand and pointed. Mercy followed her daughter's finger and saw it. A cluster of buildings maybe half a mile away, dark shapes against the brown earth. The ranch. Relief and terror hit her at the same time. "All right." She picked up one end of the trunk. "Help me, Noah." He grabbed the other side with both hands. It was too heavy for him, but he pulled anyway, his face going red with effort. They dragged it across the rough ground while Eliza walked beside them, carrying the one small bag that held everything else they owned. Mercy's hands were already raw by the time they made it halfway. Splinters dug into her palms, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If she stopped, she might realize what she'd done, brought her babies to this desolate place at the edge of the world, gambling their lives on a stranger's letter that might have been a lie. The ranch buildings got bigger. A main house, low and sprawling, several smaller structures scattered around it, corrals with horses, mountains of hay. Everything looked hard and weathered, beaten down by too many years of wind and sun. Men appeared as they got closer, ranch hands stopping their work to stare. Mercy felt their eyes on her like physical weight. She kept her chin up and kept walking. A man stepped out from the largest barn. Even from a distance, Mercy could tell he was different from the others. The way he moved. The way everyone else seemed to shift slightly when he appeared. He walked toward them, and Mercy's hands tightened on the trunk. Callum Vane was not what she'd expected. Younger, maybe mid-30s. Tall and lean, with shoulders that filled out his worn work shirt. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile years ago. He stopped a few feet away and looked at them without expression. "You're the widow." It wasn't a question. Mercy felt Noah move closer to her side. Mercy Hollow. These are my children, Noah and Eliza. Your letter said, Iti. Well, I know what the letter said. His voice was flat. You're late. The stagecoach broke down outside Denver. We had to wait. Don't care about excuses. He looked past her at the trunk in the dirt. That all you brought? The way he said it made her face burn, like he already knew they had nothing worth bringing. We travel light, she said. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes, but disappeared too fast to be sure. He turned and walked toward the main house without another word. Mercy looked at Noah, then at Eliza. Her daughter's face was completely blank. They followed him. The ranch hands went back to their work, but Mercy felt them watching, judging. She heard low voices, someone laughing. The sound made her want to turn around and walk back into the prairie until she disappeared. Callum led them around the back of the house to a small structure that looked like it used to be a storage shed. He pushed open the door and stood aside. Mercy looked inside and her heart sank. The room was barely 10 feet square. Dirt floor. One tiny window so filthy you could barely see through it. Empty except for some broken crates and what looked like animal droppings in the corner. This is where we're staying? The words came out before she could stop them. Callum's expression didn't change. You want a room in the house? You earn it. Everyone here earns their keep. No exceptions. I'm willing to work. That's why I came. But my children... Your children are your problem, not mine. He started to leave, then stopped. Meals are at dawn, noon, and dusk. Miss them and you don't eat. Cooking rotation starts tomorrow. You'll take your turn like everyone else. Wait. Mercy stepped toward him. The letter said room and board. This isn't... That's the room. He gestured at the shed. Board means you eat if you work. Simple as that. I have 2 young children who need... Everyone needs something, Mrs. Hollow. Life doesn't care. He walked away without looking back. Mercy stood there shaking, not from cold, from rage so pure it made her vision blur. Noah tugged on her sleeve. Mama, I don't like it here. She looked down at his frightened face and forced herself to breathe. Getting angry wouldn't help. Crying wouldn't help. They were here now and there was nowhere else to go. It's all right. She kept her voice steady even though everything inside her was screaming. We'll make it work. Eliza was already inside the shed, running one hand along the dirty wall. Her fingers came away gray with dust, but she didn't seem to notice. She found a corner and sat down on the dirt floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Mercy and Noah dragged the trunk inside. It took up most of the small space. The door wouldn't close all the way because the frame was warped. We should clean it, Mercy said. Make it better. But she didn't have anything to clean with. No broom, no rags, no water. She had nothing. She sat down on the trunk and put her face in her hands. Mama? Noah's voice was very small. Are we going to die here? The question hit her like a fist. She looked up and saw both her children watching her with identical expressions of fear, waiting for her to fix this, to make it better the way mothers were supposed to. But Mercy didn't know how to fix it. She'd made a terrible mistake coming here. She could see that now. This wasn't a fresh start. It was a slow death in the middle of nowhere with a man who looked at them like they were insects he couldn't be bothered to step on. No, she heard herself say. We're not going to die. We're going to survive. The words sounded stronger than she felt. That night they slept huddled together on top of the trunk because the dirt floor was too cold. Mercy lay awake listening to the wind howl around the shed and wondering what she'd done. In Pittsburgh, they'd at least had walls that kept out the weather. Here they had 4 rotting boards and a man who clearly wished they'd never arrived. But Pittsburgh was gone. The little apartment was gone. Thomas was gone. Everything that used to be their life had disappeared like smoke. This was what was left. She thought about the letter that had brought her here. It had come 3 weeks after the funeral from a man named Callum Vane, who said he needed help on his ranch and had heard through mutual connections that she was widowed and looking for work. Room and board provided. Honest labor required. It had seemed like providence when every other door was closing. Now she wondered if the mutual connection had been real or if Callum Vane just wrote to desperate widows he found in church bulletins, looking for free labor he could exploit. Either way, it didn't matter. They were here, and they had to survive. Morning came too early. Mercy woke to freezing cold and her whole body aching from sleeping on the hard trunk. Noah and Eliza were still asleep, curled against each other for warmth. She carefully extracted herself and stood up. Her breath made clouds in the air. Through the broken door, she could see the sky starting to lighten. Dawn. That's when Callum said meals were served. Mercy looked down at her children. They needed food. Whatever pride she had left didn't matter anymore. She stepped outside into the sharp morning air. The ranch was already awake. She could hear voices from the bunkhouse, the sound of horses moving in the corrals. Somewhere a rooster crowed. The main house looked warm. She could see lamplight in the windows. Mercy walked toward it before she could talk herself out of it. Her hands were shaking, but not from cold. The back door was open. She stepped into a large kitchen and stopped. At least a dozen men sat around a massive wooden table eating breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon hit her, and her stomach cramped with hunger. Everyone looked up when she entered. "Well, well," one of the ranch hands grinned. "The widow decided to join us after all." "Shut up, Hayes." An older man with a gray beard frowned at him, then nodded to Mercy. "Ma'am, name's Dutch. I run the bunkhouse. You looking for food?" "For my children." Her voice came out rougher than she intended. "They haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Dutch glanced toward the front of the house. "Boss said you get fed if you work." "I will work, I am working, but they're children. They need—" "Everyone needs something," a different voice said. Mercy turned and saw Callum standing in the doorway she hadn't noticed. He had a cup of coffee in one hand and that same expressionless face. "That's what you said yesterday," she told him. "I remember." "Then you know the rules." Something in his tone made her anger spike again. She was tired of proud men who thought suffering built character. Thomas had been gentle. These frontier men were made of something harder and meaner. "Fine." She looked at Dutch. "What needs doing?" The old man blinked. "Well, breakfast is already made. We take turns on rotation." "Who's cooking tomorrow?" "Hayes, but—" "I'll do it." Mercy looked around the kitchen. "I'll cook for everyone, starting tomorrow. Today, too, if there's a midday meal." Several of the men exchanged glances. Hayes laughed. "You ever cooked for a ranch crew before, lady? We're not talking about little tea parties. I've cooked for farmhands during harvest, 20 men at a time. I can handle it." That was a lie. The most she'd ever cooked for was her own small family. But these men didn't need to know that. Callum was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Breakfast is at 5. If the food's not ready, you don't eat. Nobody does." "I'll be ready." "We'll see." He turned and walked out. Dutch cleared his throat. "There's some leftover biscuits in the basket. You can take those for the young ones." Mercy wanted to cry from relief, but she just nodded. "Thank you." She grabbed the basket and walked out before anyone could see her hands shaking. Back in the shed, she woke Noah and Eliza gently. Their eyes got big when they saw the biscuits. "Not too fast," she warned as Noah reached for one. "You'll make yourself sick." But she watched them eat like she was watching a miracle. Their small faces focused completely on the food, chewing carefully to make it last. When they finished, Noah looked up at her. "Did you beg for this?" The question stung. "No, I earned it." "How?" "I'm going to cook for the ranch. All the meals." Eliza's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. She never spoke anymore. "I don't know how to cook ranch food, Mama," Noah said quietly. "Neither do I." Mercy smiled, even though she felt like screaming. "But I'm going to learn." She left them in the shed and went exploring. The ranch was bigger than she'd thought. Several barns, a blacksmith shop, a smokehouse, chicken coops, and what looked like a vegetable garden behind the main house. Or what used to be a garden. Now it was just dead plants and frozen dirt. Mercy stood looking at it for a long time. She'd had a garden once back in Pennsylvania. A tiny plot behind the apartment where she'd grown tomatoes and beans. Thomas had built her a fence to keep the rabbits out. She'd loved those quiet morning hours, watering plants and pulling weeds while the city woke up around her. This garden was nothing like that. It was huge and completely abandoned, but it had good southern exposure, and she could see where water lines had been run from the well. Someone had cared about this once. Someone had put in the work to build something. Now it was dead. Mercy knelt down and dug her fingers into the dirt. It was hard as rock, frozen solid. But underneath, she didn't know what she was looking for. Some sign that life could come back here. Some evidence that starting over was possible. All she found was dirt. That garden's been dead 3 years. She jerked around. Dutch stood a few feet away, hands shoved in his pockets. What happened to it? She asked. Woman who used to cook for us kept it up. Mrs. Chen, Chinese lady, best cook I ever met. Grew vegetables I couldn't even name. He looked sad. She died during a bad influenza outbreak. Nobody's touched the garden since. Why not? Dutch shrugged. Boss man doesn't see the point of pretty things. Food comes from town or the smokehouse. Flowers don't keep anyone alive. Mercy stood up, brushing dirt off her hands. Vegetables do. That they do, but soil's dead now. You'd have to turn it all, mix in manure, let it sit. He shook his head. That's months of work before you could even plant anything. I have time. Dutch looked at her for a long moment. You really think you're staying? Where else would I go? Most people who come out here don't last. Frontier's hard. Boss is harder. He studied her face. You seem like a decent woman. Might be better to head back to civilization while you still can. There's nothing to head back to. Mercy met his eyes. This is it for us. He nodded slowly. Then I'll show you where the tools are kept, in case you want to try your hand at that garden. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait and see if you survive the first week. He walked away, leaving Mercy standing alone beside the dead garden. That afternoon, she found a rusted shovel in the barn and started digging. The ground was so hard it made her shoulders scream, but she kept going. She only managed to turn over a few square feet before her hands started bleeding. Eliza appeared beside her, watching silently. You should go back inside, Mercy said. It's too cold out here. Her daughter didn't move, just stood there with those huge dark eyes. Mercy kept digging. Blood from her torn palms made the shovel handle slippery. She could feel blisters forming, then bursting, then forming again. Every part of her hurt, but she didn't stop. Because stopping meant admitting this was hopeless. And if this was hopeless, then everything was hopeless, and she might as well lie down in the dirt and wait to die. So she dug. When the sun started setting, she'd managed to turn over maybe 10 square feet, a pathetic amount. The garden was easily 50 feet on each side. At this rate, it would take months just to prepare the soil. She looked at her bleeding hands and wanted to laugh, or scream. She wasn't sure which. You're bleeding, Mama. Mercy jerked around. Eliza was still standing there, still watching. I know, baby. She wiped her hands on her skirt, leaving dark stains. It's okay. Eliza reached out and very gently touched one of the blisters. Her small face was serious. Then she turned and walked toward the shed without another word. Mercy stood there, feeling something crack open in her chest. Eliza had touched her. That was the most connection her daughter had shown in 4 months. Maybe that was worth the bleeding hands. She dragged herself back to the shed as darkness fell. Noah had found an old blanket somewhere and spread it on the floor. He'd even tried to clean up a little, pushing the animal droppings into one corner with a stick. I made it better, he said proudly. Mercy hugged him hard. You did perfect. They ate the last of the biscuits for dinner. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Mercy lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the next morning. She'd promised to cook breakfast for the entire ranch. She had no idea what she was doing. But she'd made a promise, and these men would be watching to see if she failed. So she couldn't fail. At 4 a.m, she woke herself up and crept to the main house. The kitchen was dark and cold. She found matches and lit the lamps, then stood looking at the massive stove. It was 3 times the size of anything she'd ever used. She had no idea how to regulate the heat or where anything was stored. For a moment, panic seized her. She was going to fail. They would all laugh at her, and Callum would throw them out, and her children would starve in the middle of nowhere. Then she thought about Eliza touching her bleeding hand, and she started opening cabinets. She found flour, salt, lard, coffee beans that needed grinding, eggs in a cold box, a slab of bacon wrapped in cloth. Dutch had said breakfast was at 5. That gave her 1 hour. Mercy built up the fire and started working. She'd never made biscuits for this many people, but the principle was the same. Flour, lard, buttermilk, if you had it. She mixed everything by feel, trying to remember her mother's hands doing this years ago. The bacon went in a huge cast-iron skillet. The smell filled the kitchen. She made coffee strong enough to strip paint, the way Thomas used to drink it. The biscuits went in the oven and she prayed they would rise. At 5 o'clock exactly, men started filing into the kitchen. They looked surprised to find her there, hair escaping from her braid, face red from the heat of the stove. Dutch came in first. He looked at the food and something like approval crossed his face. "Smells good." The others sat down. Hayes muttered something under his breath but took his plate when she offered it. The biscuits were uneven, some burned on the bottom, others still a little doughy in the middle, but they were edible. Nobody complained. Callum appeared last. He took coffee, black, and one biscuit. Bit into it. Chewed slowly while everyone watched. "Needs salt," he said finally. That was all. He sat down and ate. Mercy felt her shoulders relax slightly. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't rejection either. She'd done it. First test passed. After breakfast, she brought food back to the shed for Noah and Eliza. They ate hungrily while she examined her hands. The blisters had gotten worse overnight. She needed bandages, but had none. "Your hands look bad, Mama," Noah said. "They'll heal. Will you cook again tomorrow?" "Every day." "What if your hands don't heal?" Mercy looked at her son's worried face. "Then I'll cook with bloody hands. Doesn't matter." She meant it. Nothing was going to stop her from earning their place here. Not bleeding hands, not Callum's cold silence, not the dead garden, or the freezing shed, or the way the ranch hands looked at her like she was already defeated. She would survive this. Her children would survive this. Everything else could burn. For the next week, she cooked every meal. Breakfast at dawn, lunch at noon, dinner at dusk. Massive amounts of food for men who worked 16-hour days. Her hands never had time to heal. Every morning she woke up and they'd cracked open again during the night. But the food got better. She learned how to manage the big stove. Found spices in the back of cabinets. Started making things that actually tasted good instead of just filling stomachs. The men stopped looking at her like she was temporary. In the afternoon she worked in the garden. Turned soil until her back screamed. Mixed in manure from the stables that made her gag. Eliza helped sometimes, moving small stones out of the way without being asked. Noah brought her water. Other ranch hands started watching. At first with amusement, the widow playing in the dirt, then with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or respect that someone would work that hard for no reason. One afternoon, Dutch appeared with a wheelbarrow full of composted hay. "Might help the soil," he said gruffly. "If you're serious about this." "I'm serious." He dumped it where she pointed and left without another word. 2 days later, a younger ranch hand named Sam brought her seeds he'd saved from last season. "Don't know if they're still good, but you're welcome to try." The gifts came sporadically, but they came. A trowel that someone had sharpened, a bucket for carrying water, a worn pair of work gloves that were too big but better than nothing. Nobody said much. These weren't soft men who talked about feelings, but they were watching. And slowly, grudgingly, some of them started to help. Callum never helped, never spoke to her except to criticize the food. Too much salt, not enough coffee, biscuits too dry. Always something wrong, but he never told her to stop, and he never threatened to throw them out. Mercy counted that as victory. 10 days after they arrived, she was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard shouting from outside. She looked through the window and saw men running toward the corrals. Something was wrong. She wiped her hands and went out. A crowd had gathered by one of the barns. She pushed through and stopped. A horse was down. A big sorrel gelding thrashing in the dirt. Even from here she could see something was badly wrong. Its belly was distended, eyes rolling white with pain. "Colic," Dutch said grimly. "Bad." "Where's the boss?" someone asked. "Rode out this morning. Won't be back till tomorrow." The horse screamed. The sound made Mercy's skin crawl. "Someone has to do something," Sam said. His face was pale. "Ain't nothing to do," Hayes said flatly. "Horse is dying. Best thing is to put it down quick." "That's Rex," another man protested. "Boss man's favorite. He'll lose his mind if we shoot his horse." "Then what do you suggest? Wait for it to die slow?" They started arguing. Mercy watched the horse twist in agony and felt something old stir in her memory. Her grandfather had raised horses. She'd been maybe 12 years old when one of his mares colicked. She remembered him giving orders while everyone ran to help. Walk the horse, no water, massage the belly, mineral oil if you could get it down. The mare had lived. "Move," Mercy heard herself say. The men turned to look at her. "Ma'am, this ain't," Dutch started. I said move. She pushed past them and walked toward the horse. Lady, that animal will kick your head off, Hayes warned. But Mercy was already kneeling beside the gelding. Up close she could see foam around its mouth, the way its muscles were seizing. Not good, but not dead yet either. She put her hand on its neck, spoke quietly even though her heart was hammering. Easy, easy now. The horse's eye rolled toward her. She could see terror in it, and pain. We need to get him up, she said. Oh, walking will help, and mineral oil if you have it. You can't, someone started. Do you have mineral oil or not? She didn't look away from the horse. In the barn, for the saddles. Get it, and a length of hose if you have one. Nobody moved. She looked up and saw them all staring at her like she'd lost her mind. Now! Her voice cracked like a whip. They scattered. Dutch helped her get the horse to its feet. It took 4 of them pulling, but the gelding finally stumbled upright. Mercy kept talking to it, one hand steady on its neck. Walk him, she ordered. Slow circles. Don't let him lie down. Sam appeared with the oil and a piece of rubber hose. Mercy took both and tried to remember what her grandfather had done. The hose went down the throat. Pour the oil in slow. Massage the belly to break up the blockage. Her hands were shaking, but she made them steady. The horse fought when she tried to put the hose in its mouth. Nearly knocked her down, but Dutch grabbed the halter and between them they managed it. Mercy poured oil down the hose while Sam walked the horse in circles. She pressed on the distended belly, feeling for the twisted section of gut that was killing the animal. The men watched in silence. Minutes passed, then an hour. The horse started to sweat less. The wild look in its eye faded slightly. Then suddenly it stopped walking and lifted its tail. The sound of normal bowel movements made several ranch hands cheer. Mercy stepped back, breathing hard. The horse shook its head and looked almost normal. Still sick, still weak, but the immediate crisis had passed. Dutch was grinning. I'll be damned. You saved Rex. Mercy wiped her shaking hands on her skirt. He's not out of danger yet. Keep walking him. No food tonight, just small amounts of water. Watch him close. Yes, ma'am. Dutch actually sounded respectful. She walked back to the house on legs that felt like water. Inside the kitchen, she slumped against the wall and let herself shake. What had she just done? She could have killed Callum's horse, could have made everything worse. But she hadn't. The horse was alive. That night at dinner, the men treated her differently. Hayes actually said thank you when she served his plate. Sam asked if she needed anything from town. Even the quietest ranch hands nodded to her when they came in. Something had shifted. Callum returned the next afternoon. Mercy was in the garden when she heard his horse. She looked up and saw him riding toward the corrals. 5 minutes later, he came striding toward the garden. His face was dark. Here it comes, Mercy thought. He's going to be furious that I touched his horse. He stopped a few feet away, looked at her kneeling in the dirt with her bleeding hands and dirty face. Rex is alive, he said. Yes. Dutch said you saved him. The horse saved himself. I just helped. Callum stared at her for a long moment. She couldn't read his expression. You know horses, he said finally. My grandfather raised them. I remembered a few things. A few things. He almost smiled. Almost. Dutch said the crew wanted to shoot him. You stopped them. Mercy stood up. Her knees ached. Everything ached. Was that wrong? No. He paused. Thank you. The words sounded rusty, like he didn't say them often. Maybe never. Mercy nodded. You're welcome. He looked at the garden, at the turned soil and the compost mixed in. What are you doing out here? Trying to grow something. It's almost winter. Nothing grows in winter. I'm preparing for spring. Spring is 6 months away. You might not be here in 6 months. Mercy met his eyes. Yes, I will. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or respect. Hard to tell with him. You keep surprising me, Mrs. Hollow. Good. This time he definitely almost smiled. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Mercy standing in the middle of the garden with dirt under her nails and hope beating fragile wings in her chest. That night she sat with her children in the shed and felt the cold a little less. Noah was already asleep, but Eliza sat beside her, leaning against her shoulder. Are we going to be okay, Mama? Noah had asked earlier. Mercy had looked at her son's scared face and realized she could answer honestly now. Yes, she'd told him. We're going to be okay. She was starting to believe it. The ranch wasn't kind. Callum wasn't kind. The frontier would kill them without hesitation if they made mistakes. But Mercy was learning something important. She was stronger than she thought. Stronger than Pittsburgh widows were supposed to be. Stronger than grief and fear and bleeding hands. Strong enough to survive. And maybe, just maybe, strong enough to build something new from the ashes of everything she'd lost. Outside, the wind howled across the prairie. Inside the shed, her children slept and Mercy sat awake planning tomorrow's meals, next week's garden work, all the small steps that would carry them forward into an uncertain future. She thought about Thomas and felt the familiar ache of his absence. But the ache didn't destroy her anymore. It was just there, a scar that had finally started to heal. In the darkness, Mercy Hollow closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and she would be ready. 3 weeks passed, and Mercy stopped counting days. Time moved differently on the ranch, measured in meals cooked, soil turned, small victories that kept them alive. The shed was still cold and cramped, but Noah had found boards to patch the worst gaps in the walls. Eliza still didn't speak, but she worked beside Mercy in the garden every afternoon, her small hands surprisingly strong. The men had stopped looking at Mercy like she was temporary. Now they just looked at her like she was part of the landscape, another fixture of the ranch that had always been there and probably always would be. Callum remained distant. He ate her food without comment most days, occasionally criticized something, never thanked her again after that one time with Rex. But he'd moved them out of the shed 2 weeks ago without explanation. Just appeared one morning and said there was a room in the back of the house they could use. It was barely bigger than the shed, but it had a real floor and a window that closed and a door that locked. Mercy had almost cried when she saw it. "Don't get used to luxury," Callum had said dryly. "You're still working for your keep." "I know." He'd looked at her for a moment longer than necessary, then walked away. Now it was late August, and the heat pressed down on the prairie like a physical weight. Mercy was in the kitchen before dawn as usual, grinding coffee beans and trying to decide if the bacon was still good. The smokehouse kept things cold, but not cold enough in this weather. She heard footsteps and looked up. Dutch stood in the doorway looking wrong somehow. His face was gray. "You feeling all right?" she asked. "Just tired." But his voice was rough. "Coffee ready?" Almost. She watched him sit down heavily at the table. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm fine." "Stop fussing." But he wasn't fine. Mercy could see it in the way he moved, like his bones hurt. She'd seen that look before, right before Thomas got sick. The thought made her chest tighten, but she pushed it away. Probably nothing. Men got tired. That was normal. The rest of the crew filed in for breakfast. Sam looked pale too, and Hayes kept coughing into his sleeve. "Anyone else feeling rough this morning?" Mercy asked casually as she served eggs. 3 hands went up, then 2 more. Dutch frowned. "Probably just the heat. Gets to everyone eventually." "Probably," Mercy agreed. But she didn't believe it. By noon, Sam had collapsed in the barn. 2 other ranch hands were running fevers high enough that they couldn't work. Dutch tried to keep going, but Mercy found him sitting on a hay bale, shaking so hard his teeth rattled. "Bunkhouse," she ordered. "Now." "I got work." "I don't care. You're burning up. Get to bed before you fall over." He was too sick to argue. Callum came back from the north pasture around 3 and found half his crew laid out. His face went hard. "What the hell happened?" Mercy was coming out of the bunkhouse with an armload of dirty blankets. "Fever. Started this morning, spreading fast." "How many?" 8 so far. Maybe more by tonight." Callum swore under his breath. "Anyone sent for the doctor?" "Nearest doctor is 3 days' ride. By the time he got here—" She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what happened when frontier fevers got loose. People died. Sometimes a lot of people. "What do we need?" Callum asked. Mercy stopped. He was asking her, not telling her what to do, not dismissing her concerns. Actually asking. "Clean water, lots of it. Willow bark if you have it, yarrow if you don't. Cool cloths, and someone to keep watch through the nights." "Willow bark's in the medicine cabinet. I'll get it." He paused. "You know what you're doing?" "My mother was a nurse before she married. She taught me some things." "Good enough." He headed toward the house, then stopped. "Mrs. Hollow?" "Yes?" "Don't get sick yourself. I can't afford to lose you." It wasn't sentiment. just practical calculation. But coming from Callum, it felt almost like concern. Mercy spent the rest of the day turning the bunkhouse into a sick ward. She boiled water, brewed willow bark tea until the whole place smelled bitter, and forced liquids down the throats of men who were too weak to sit up. Their fevers climbed as the sun set. Sam started hallucinating, calling for his mother. Hayes couldn't stop shaking. Dutch was the worst. His fever spiked so high, Mercy thought he might die right there. She packed him in wet sheets and prayed the heat would break. Noah appeared in the doorway around dusk, Eliza behind him. "Mama, are they dying?" "No." She didn't look up from wringing out another cloth. "They're sick, but they're not dying." "Can we help?" "No, baby. I need you to stay away. Both of you. This fever spreads fast." "But you're here," Noah pointed out. "What if you get sick?" "I won't." She said it with confidence she didn't feel. "Now go back to the house. There's bread and cheese in the kitchen. Make sure your sister eats." Noah hesitated, then nodded. Eliza lingered a moment longer, her dark eyes worried. Then they both left. Mercy worked through the night. Every hour she checked temperatures, changed wet cloths, spooned tea into mouths that could barely swallow. 2 more men came down with fever before midnight. The bunkhouse was running out of beds. Callum appeared around 3 in the morning with more blankets and a fresh bucket of water from the well. "You should rest," he said. "Can't. They need watching. You're going to collapse." "Not yet." He looked at her for a long moment. Mercy knew she must look terrible. Hair falling out of its braid, dress soaked with sweat, and probably worse, dark circles under her eyes. "Stubborn woman," Callum muttered. "That's what keeps me alive." Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Then he set down the water and left. The fever broke for Sam around dawn. His temperature dropped, and he fell into real sleep instead of the restless thrashing that had consumed him all night. Mercy felt a rush of relief so strong it made her dizzy. 1 down, 10 more to go. Over the next 3 days, the fever raged through the bunkhouse. 2 more ranch hands fell sick. One of the older men, a quiet guy named Peterson, got so bad they thought they'd lose him. His breathing turned shallow, and his lips went blue. Mercy stayed with him for 16 hours straight, forcing tea down his throat every 20 minutes, keeping his fever down with ice water that made her own hands go numb. Around hour 14, Callum came in and found her slumped in a chair beside Peterson's bed, half asleep, but still wringing out cloths on autopilot. "Mercy," she jerked awake. "What? Is someone—" "You need to sleep." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look half dead." He pulled her to her feet. "Dutch is awake, and his fever's down. He can watch for a few hours." "But Peterson will still be here when you wake up." Callum steered her toward the door. 3 hours. That's all I'm asking. 3 hours of sleep so you don't collapse and leave me with nobody who knows what the hell they're doing." Mercy wanted to argue, but her body was shutting down whether she liked it or not. She let him guide her back to the house and into her small room. 3 hours, she mumbled. 3 hours, he agreed. She was asleep before he closed the door. When she woke, it was dark outside. Panic seized her. How long had she been out? She stumbled to the bunkhouse and found Dutch sitting with Peterson. "How is he?" she asked. Dutch looked up. "Fever broke about an hour ago. He's going to make it." Mercy felt her knees go weak. "Thank the—" She stopped herself. "That's good. That's really good." "You slept 9 hours, not 3, Dutch said. "Boss man's orders. He stood outside your door to make sure nobody woke you." Mercy blinked. "He what?" "Told everyone you'd worked yourself half to death, and if anyone disturbed you, he'd shoot them." Dutch's eyes twinkled. "Think he meant it too." She didn't know what to say to that. "Anyway," Dutch continued, "everyone's fever is down except young Tommy. His is still climbing." Mercy found Tommy in the corner bed burning up and delirious. He was the youngest ranch hand, barely 18, with a baby face and a scared look in his eyes even when he was healthy. "Hey, Tommy," she said gently, sitting beside him. "I'm here now. You're going to be all right." "Ma?" His voice was small. "Ma, I can't breathe right." "I'm not your ma, honey, but I'm going to take care of you just the same." She spent the next 12 hours fighting for Tommy's life. His fever wouldn't break no matter what she did. The willow bark tea didn't touch it. Cold cloths evaporated in minutes. His breathing got worse. Around midnight, his chest started making a rattling sound that terrified her. "Dutch," she called quietly. "Get Callum, now!" The old man took one look at Tommy and ran. Callum appeared 5 minutes later. He took in the situation immediately. "Pneumonia?" he asked. "I think so. His lungs are filling up." "What do you need?" "A miracle." Mercy's voice cracked. "I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything." Callum knelt beside the bed, looked at Tommy's blue-tinged lips and labored breathing. "Steam," he said suddenly. "My grandmother used steam for lung sickness. Hot water with pine needles. Makes them breathe easier. It's worth trying." They set up a makeshift steam tent using blankets and a pot of boiling water with pine branches. Mercy held Tommy upright while Callum kept the water hot. The steam filled the small space and Tommy's breathing eased slightly. "Come on, kid," Callum muttered. "Don't you dare die. Not after we've come this far." It was the most emotion Mercy had ever heard in his voice. They stayed like that for hours, Callum keeping the water boiling, Mercy holding Tommy, both of them willing the boy to keep breathing. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Tommy's fever finally broke. The blue tinge faded from his lips. He was going to live. Mercy started crying and couldn't stop. All the exhaustion and fear and desperation of the past week crashed over her at once. She tried to hold it together, but her body was done pretending to be strong. "Hey," Callum's voice was quiet. "It's all right. He's all right." "I know. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm—" She couldn't finish. Callum did something she never expected. He put his arm around her shoulders and let her cry against his chest while Tommy slept peacefully for the first time in days. They sat like that until dawn started breaking outside. Mercy finally got herself under control and pulled away, embarrassed. "Sorry," she said again. "Don't be." Callum's face was unreadable as always. "You saved them all. Every single one of them would be dead without you." "We don't know that." "I do." He stood up. "Get some sleep. Real sleep this time." "What about—" "I'll watch them. Go." Mercy was too tired to argue. She stumbled back to her room and collapsed on the bed fully clothed. When she woke up, it was late afternoon and someone had left food on the small table by the window. Bread, cheese, cold chicken, her stomach cramped with hunger. She ate everything, then went to check on the bunkhouse. All the men were recovering, weak and shaky, but alive. They looked at her with something like awe when she came in. "Ma'am," Hayes said hoarsely, "Dutch said you stayed up for days taking care of us." "Someone had to. You could have run, let us die, and saved yourself and your kids." Mercy frowned. "Why would I do that?" "Because most people would." He looked uncomfortable. "I wasn't exactly welcoming when you first got here. None of us were. But you saved our lives anyway." "That's what decent people do," she said simply. Sam spoke up from his bed. "You're more than decent, Mrs. Hollow. You're pretty damn amazing if you ask me." Several other men nodded. Even Hayes looked like he agreed. Mercy felt her face heat up. "I just did what needed doing." "That's what makes it amazing," Dutch said from the doorway. He still looked weak, but he was standing upright. "Most folks talk about doing what needs doing. You actually do it." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just started checking temperatures and changing bandages. But something had shifted. She could feel it in the way the men looked at her now. Not like a burden or a curiosity or even a useful cook. Like someone who belonged. That evening, Callum found her in the garden. She was pulling weeds with hands that were finally starting to heal. The garden was actually looking like something now. Neat rows of turned earth ready for spring planting, a border of stones she'd hauled from the creek bed. "They're all going to make it," she said without looking up. "Even Peterson." "I know. I checked earlier." Callum was quiet for a moment. "You worked yourself near to death for them. They're good men. They deserved someone fighting for them." "That's not why you did it." Mercy stopped and looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You did it because you're stubborn and you don't know how to quit, even when you should." "Is that a bad thing?" "No." His face was serious. "It's the only reason any of us are still alive." He walked away before she could respond, leaving Mercy kneeling in the dirt wondering what had just happened. That was almost a compliment. From Callum Vane, that was practically a declaration of devotion. She went back to weeding, but her hands were shaking slightly. Over the next week, the bunkhouse slowly emptied as men recovered enough to go back to work. They moved carefully, still weak, but determined to pull their weight again. Mercy kept cooking massive meals to help them rebuild their strength. She made bone broth and thick stews and bread with extra butter. The men ate like they were starving, which they basically were. One morning, she was in the kitchen rolling out pie dough when Tommy appeared. He looked thin and pale, but his eyes were clear. "Ma'am, can I talk to you?" "Of course. Sit down before you fall over." He sat, fiddled with his hat. "I wanted to say thank you for saving my life." "You're welcome, Tommy. I mean it. I was dying. I felt myself dying, and you wouldn't let me." He looked up and his eyes were wet. "My real ma died when I was 12. Haven't had anyone care like that since. So, thank you." Mercy's throat tightened. "You're a good kid, Tommy. I wasn't about to let you die if I could help it." "Well, I owe you. Anything you ever need, you just ask." "I mean that. I'll remember." After he left, Mercy stood at the counter with floury hands and realized something. She'd stopped thinking about Pittsburgh, stopped thinking about the life she'd lost and the husband who was gone. That whole world felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. This was her life now. This ranch, these men, this hard frontier existence that had almost killed her a dozen times over. And somehow she was okay with that. The garden became her refuge in the afternoons. The soil was ready now, waiting for spring. She'd even built a small fence to keep out rabbits, using scraps from the barn. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. Eliza spent hours in the garden with her, still silent but present, working beside Mercy in comfortable quiet. Sometimes Noah joined them, though he preferred following the ranch hands around and learning to ride. One afternoon, Mercy looked up from planting marker stakes and saw Callum watching from the barn. He didn't look away when she caught him staring, just stood there with that unreadable expression. She wanted to ask what he was thinking, wanted to understand this complicated, damaged man who'd given her shelter when he clearly didn't want the burden, who criticized her cooking but never actually complained, who'd held her while she cried and then never mentioned it again. But asking would mean acknowledging that she cared what he thought, and Mercy wasn't ready to admit that yet, not even to herself. That night she was cleaning up the kitchen after dinner when Callum came in. The house was quiet. The ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse, and her children were already asleep. "Coffee?" she offered. "Sure." She poured 2 cups, and they sat at the table in silence. Outside the window, the prairie stretched dark under a huge sky full of stars. "The garden looks good," Callum said finally. "Thank you. It'll be better in spring." "If you're still here," Mercy met his eyes. "I'll be here." "You're that sure?" "Yes." He studied her face. "Why?" "Because I don't have anywhere else to go. And because—" she hesitated. "Because I think I belong here now. Even though it's hard, even though you live in a room barely bigger than a closet and work 16 hours a day and almost died from exhaustion a week ago. Yes, even though all that." Callum was quiet for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone weak? Someone who'd cry and complain and leave within a month?" He shook his head. "But you're not weak at all, are you?" "I'm terrified most of the time," Mercy admitted. "I just don't let it stop me." "That's not weakness, that's courage." The word hung between them. Mercy felt her face heat up and looked away. "I should finish cleaning," she said. "Mercy." She looked back. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you've done. For saving my men. For staying. For—" He trailed off like he didn't know how to finish. "You're welcome." He stood up and walked to the door, then paused. "I'm glad you're here." Then he was gone, leaving Mercy sitting alone in the kitchen with her heart beating too fast. She told herself it didn't mean anything. He was just being grateful. That was all. But she thought about the way he'd looked at her and knew she was lying to herself. The next morning started normal. Mercy cooked breakfast, the men ate and headed out to work. She cleaned up and started preparing lunch. But around mid-morning, Dutch came running back to the house looking panicked. "What's wrong?" Mercy asked. "It's the boss. Something's wrong with him." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He was fine this morning. Then about an hour ago, he started acting strange, dizzy, confused. Now he's burning up with fever. No, not Callum. Anyone but Callum. Mercy ran to the barn where they'd laid him out on a pile of hay. One look told her everything, the same fever that had torn through the bunkhouse. It had just taken longer to reach him. His eyes were half closed and his skin was gray. When she touched his forehead, she felt heat that made her pull back. How long has he been like this? Maybe an hour. It came on fast. Too fast. That was bad. When the fever hit fast, it hit hard. Get him to the house, my room, and bring cold water, willow bark, everything we used before. The men carried Callum inside and laid him on Mercy's narrow bed. She sent the children to sleep in the kitchen and got to work. His fever was higher than anyone else's had been. She packed him in wet sheets, but they dried out in minutes. The willow bark tea barely touched it. By nightfall, he was delirious, thrashing and calling out words she couldn't understand. Callum, she gripped his shoulders. You need to stay still. You're making it worse. Can't lose. His eyes opened, but they didn't focus on her. Have to keep them safe. Everyone's safe. The ranch is fine. You just need to rest. But he wasn't hearing her. He was somewhere else entirely, fighting battles she couldn't see. Mercy worked through the night the same way she had with the others. But this time was different. This time every rasping breath terrified her. This time the thought of losing the patient made her chest constrict with something that felt dangerously close to panic. Around midnight, his fever spiked even higher. His breathing turned shallow. For a horrible moment, Mercy thought he was going to die right there in front of her. No, she said out loud. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to leave. She stripped off the wet sheets and started sponging him down with ice water straight from the well. It was so cold it made her hands ache, but she didn't stop. She forced more tea down his throat, even though half of it came back up. Stay with me, she whispered. Please stay with me. His eyes opened briefly. For just a second, they focused on her face. Mercy, he breathed. Then he was gone again, lost in the fever. She kept working, hour after hour. Her whole body ached, but she ignored it. Her vision blurred from exhaustion, but she blinked it clear. Somewhere around dawn, his breathing evened out slightly. The deadly heat in his skin dropped a few degrees. Not much, but enough. Mercy slumped in the chair beside the bed and put her head in her hands. He was going to live. She was almost sure of it. The worst had passed. Relief flooded through her so intensely she started shaking. Dutch appeared in the doorway. How is he? Better. Fever's dropping. Her voice was hoarse. You saved him too. Maybe. We'll know for sure in a few hours. Dutch looked at her with something like wonder. You're something else, Mrs. Hollow. I'm just tired, Dutch. That's not what I meant. He hesitated. Boss man cares about you, you know, more than he wants to admit. Mercy's head snapped up. What? I've known Callum Vane for 15 years. Watched him turn cold after his wife died. Thought he'd never thaw out again. But then you showed up and... Dutch shrugged. He's different around you. Better. His wife died? 5 years ago. Childbirth. Baby died too. Destroyed him. Dutch's face was sad. He blamed himself. Stopped letting anyone close after that. Until you. Mercy didn't know what to say. She looked at Callum's sleeping face and saw him differently now. Not just a hard rancher, but a man who'd lost everything and survived, just like her. Get some rest, Dutch said gently. I'll watch him for a while. Thank you. She stumbled out to the kitchen where Noah and Eliza were eating breakfast. They both looked worried. Is Mr. Vane going to die? Noah asked. No, baby. He's going to be fine. Eliza came over and hugged her tightly without a word. Mercy held her daughter and felt tears sting her eyes. She slept for a few hours on the kitchen floor, too exhausted to make it anywhere else. When she woke, Callum's fever had broken completely. He was sleeping normally, color returning to his face. Mercy sat beside him and watched him breathe. Alive. Against all odds, alive. His eyes opened slowly. He looked at her in confusion. What happened? You got the fever, bad. You've been out for almost 2 days. 2 days? He tried to sit up and fell back with a groan. Hell! Don't move too fast. You're still weak. He looked at her properly now. You took care of me. Of course I did. Why? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, why? You were dying. So? I haven't exactly been kind to you. Mercy shook her head. You gave us shelter when we had nowhere else to go. You moved us out of that awful shed. She hesitated. You matter to me. That's why. Callum stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. The walls he kept up seemed to crack slightly. Mercy. Rest, she interrupted, suddenly terrified of where this conversation was going. We can talk later. She left before he could say anything else. But she knew something had changed between them. Something that couldn't be taken back. And despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertainty of this brutal frontier life, Mercy realized she didn't want to take it back anyway. Callum recovered slowly, stubbornly insisting on working before he was ready, and collapsing twice before he finally admitted defeat. Mercy found him the second time face down in the barn and dragged him back to bed despite his protests. You're going to kill yourself, she told him flatly. I'm fine. You can't even stand up without swaying. That's not fine. He glared at her but didn't argue further. Something had shifted between them since the fever, a tension that made the air feel charged whenever they were in the same room. He watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, then hating herself for it. She'd buried one husband already. Getting attached to another man, especially one as damaged and difficult as Callum Vane, was asking for heartbreak. But her heart apparently didn't care about logic. September arrived with cooler nights and the first hints of color in the distant trees. The ranch hands worked long days preparing for winter, fixing fences, storing hay, butchering cattle. Mercy preserved everything she could, filling the cellar with jars of vegetables from the garden that had somehow survived the summer heat. Noah had grown taller, his face losing some of its baby roundness. He spent most days following Dutch around, learning to rope and ride. Eliza still didn't speak, but she smiled occasionally now, small secret smiles that made Mercy's chest ache with hope. One evening in late September, Callum found Mercy in the garden pulling up the last of the tomato plants. The air had a bite to it that promised winter wasn't far off. Storm coming, he said without preamble. Mercy looked at the sky. It was clear and blue. How do you know? Feel it in my bones, big one. He crouched beside her and pulled up a plant she'd been struggling with. We'll need to bring the cattle down from the high pasture before it hits. Could take a few days. When are you leaving? Dawn tomorrow. He looked at her. You'll be all right here? We've been all right for months. I think we can manage a few days. That's not what I asked. Mercy met his eyes. Yes, Callum, we'll be fine. He nodded slowly. Dutch is staying behind with a couple of the younger hands. Anything happens, you find him. Nothing's going to happen. Humor me. She almost smiled. All right, if something happens, I'll find Dutch. Callum stood to leave, then hesitated. Mercy. Yes? Be careful. The way he said it made her heart skip, like she mattered, like the thought of something happening to her actually scared him. You too, she said quietly. He left before sunrise the next morning with most of the crew. Mercy watched from the kitchen window as they rode out, Callum at the front on his big black horse. He didn't look back. The ranch felt strange without them. Too quiet. Dutch and the two hands who'd stayed behind kept busy with chores, but the energy was different, waiting, like the whole world was holding its breath. The storm hit 2 days later. Mercy woke to wind howling around the house like something alive and angry. She looked out the window and couldn't see anything, just white. Snow coming down so thick it was like staring into a wall. Mama? Noah appeared in the doorway looking frightened. What's happening? Just a storm, baby. It'll pass. But it didn't pass. It got worse. By noon, the wind was strong enough to shake the whole house. Snow piled up against the windows until they couldn't see out at all. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on the inside of the glass. Mercy built up the fire and tried not to panic. Callum and the others were out there somewhere. In this. Dutch came to the house around mid-afternoon, snow coating him head to toe. Can't see 5 feet in front of my face, he said, stamping his boots. Worst blizzard I've seen in 20 years. What about Callum and the others? They're smart. They'll find shelter and wait it out. But he looked worried. Could last days, though. We need to conserve firewood and food. No telling when we'll be able to get out. They rationed everything carefully. Mercy cooked simple meals with as little fuel as possible. The three of them, her, Dutch, Sam, and young Tommy, huddled in the main house because the bunkhouse was too far away to risk crossing. The children stayed close to the fire, wrapped in every blanket they could find. The first day passed in white chaos. The second day was worse. The wind never stopped, howling like something that wanted to tear the world apart. Snow drifted so high against the east wall that Mercy worried the house would collapse. On the third day, they started running out of wood. We burned through it faster than expected, Dutch admitted. He looked old suddenly, his face gray with worry. Cold's worse than I thought. What do we do? He looked around the room, at the heavy table, the chairs, the cabinet against the wall. We burned the furniture. Mercy's heart sank, but she nodded. Survival mattered more than tables and chairs. They started with the spare chairs from the dining room, breaking them apart and feeding them to the fire. The wood burned fast, too fast. By evening, they'd gone through 6 chairs and were still freezing. Food was running low, too. Mercy stretched a pot of beans across 3 meals, adding water until it was barely more than flavored liquid. She gave most of her portion to the children when they weren't looking. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she ignored it. On the 4th day, Sam volunteered to check on the animals. He made it to the barn and back, but came in looking shaken. Lost 2 horses, he said, froze to death. And the chickens are in bad shape. They were all in bad shape. Mercy could see it in everyone's faces, the hollow eyes, the way hands trembled from more than just cold. They were running out of everything: time, food, warmth, hope. That night Mercy lay awake listening to the wind try to rip the roof off. Eliza was curled against her on one side, Noah on the other. They were both so thin. When had they gotten so thin? She thought about Callum out there somewhere in the storm and felt sick. He could be dead. They could all be dead. And she'd never told him. What? What would she have told him? That she cared about him? That somewhere between the bleeding hands and the fever and the quiet conversations over coffee, she'd stopped seeing him as just the hard-eyed rancher who'd given them shelter. That he'd become something more, something that scared her because losing him would hurt almost as much as losing Thomas had? Mercy closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but all she could hear was the wind screaming. The 5th day dawned gray and still howling. They were down to burning the dining table. Dutch took an axe to it with grim determination, while Mercy pretended not to see the way his hands shook. "We're not going to make it, are we?" Tommy asked quietly. He was supposed to be feeding wood to the fire, but had stopped, just staring at the flames. "Don't talk like that," Dutch snapped. "Why not? It's true. We're going to freeze or starve or both, and the boss is probably already dead out there with the rest of them. You don't know that? Look around, Dutch. We're out of food. Almost out of wood. The storm's not stopping. What do you think happens next?" Mercy stood up. "What happens next is we keep fighting." Tommy looked at her. "Why? What's the point?" "The point is we're still breathing. As long as we're breathing, we keep going." "That's just words." "No. It's a choice." Mercy's voice was hard. "You can give up and die right now if you want, but my children are not dying in this house. So I'm going to keep fighting, and you're going to help me or get out of my way." Tommy stared at her. Then, slowly, he picked up another piece of wood and fed it to the fire. Dutch caught Mercy's eye and nodded slightly. She nodded back. They made it through another day. Barely. That night the temperature dropped even further. They huddled around the fire wrapped in every piece of fabric they could find. Mercy held her children and felt them shivering against her. She was so tired, tired of being cold, tired of being hungry, tired of pretending she had everything under control. "Tell us a story, Mama," Noah whispered. "I don't know any stories right now, baby." "Please, I'm scared." Mercy closed her eyes. What story could possibly help? What words could make this better? Then she heard herself speaking, telling them about the garden that would bloom in spring, about the vegetables they'd grow, and the flowers that would fill the air with color, about warm summer days when they'd sit in the shade and eat tomatoes still warm from the sun. It was a lie. They'd probably all be dead before spring, but Noah relaxed against her, and even Eliza seemed to breathe easier. Sometimes lies were kinder than truth. On the sixth day, the wind finally started to ease. The howling faded to a dull roar, then to occasional gusts. By mid-afternoon, Mercy could see patches of sky through the snow. The storm was ending. Dutch risked going outside and came back covered in white but grinning. It's stopping, really stopping. They all cheered weakly. Mercy felt tears on her face and didn't bother wiping them away. But the relief was short-lived. They were out of wood except for one chair Dutch had been saving, out of food except for a handful of beans, and still no sign of Callum or the others. They could be anywhere, Sam said, staring out at the white wasteland. Could have taken shelter miles from here. Or they could be dead, Tommy added. Shut up, Tommy, Dutch said tiredly. Mercy went to the window and looked out at the devastation. Snow everywhere, drifted so high it covered fences and reached halfway up the barn. The world looked dead, frozen and lifeless. Somewhere out there was Callum. Alive or dead, she didn't know. But either way, she realized she'd been lying to herself. She did care about him. More than care. The thought of never seeing him again made her chest feel hollow. We should send someone to look for them, she said. Dutch shook his head. Too dangerous. Snow's still deep and we don't know which direction they went. So we just wait? That's all we can do. Mercy hated waiting, hated feeling helpless. But Dutch was right. Going out there would just get more people killed. That night they burned the last chair and ate the last of the beans. Tomorrow there would be nothing. Mercy lay awake trying to figure out what to do. They couldn't stay in the house with no heat or food. But they couldn't leave either, not with children, not in this cold. She was still awake when she heard it, faint at first, then louder. The sound of horses. Mercy bolted upright and ran to the window. Through the darkness and blowing snow she saw shapes moving. Men on horseback, ghost-like in the moonlight. Dutch, she screamed, they're back! Everyone scrambled to the door. Mercy threw it open and freezing air blasted in, but she didn't care. She could see them clearly now, 4 riders hunched over in their saddles, moving slow. The horses stumbled to a stop in front of the house. The men half fell, half climbed down. Mercy saw Callum, and her heart jumped. Get them inside, Dutch ordered. They dragged the men into the house one by one. All 4 were barely conscious, frozen nearly solid. Ice crusted their eyebrows and beards. Their clothes were stiff with frost. Callum was the worst. He couldn't stand, couldn't speak. His lips were blue. Get his wet clothes off, Mercy said, already pulling at his coat. Sam, bring blankets. Tommy, heat water. Dutch, help me. They worked fast, stripping off frozen clothes and wrapping the men in dry blankets. Mercy held a cup of warm water to Callum's lips. Drink, she ordered. Small sips. He tried, but his hands were shaking too badly to hold the cup. She held it for him, watching his face for signs of frostbite. His ears looked bad. So did his fingers. Where were you? She asked quietly. Cave? His voice was barely a whisper. Found shelter. Waited for storm. For 6 days? Couldn't move. Too much snow. He looked at her and his eyes were hollow. Lost 12 cattle, maybe more. And Hayes. Mercy's stomach dropped. Hayes is dead? Went out looking for strays on day 3. Never came back. Callum's face was empty. I should have stopped him. Should have. You did everything you could. Did I? He laughed bitterly. Half my herd is dead. One of my men is dead. The ranch is probably finished. You're alive. That's what matters. For what? To watch everything fall apart? Mercy grabbed his face and made him look at her. Listen to me. You survived. Your men survived. The ranch is still standing. Everything else we can fix. How? We have no food, no money to buy more cattle. I don't know how, but we'll figure it out. We always do. Callum stared at her. Then, slowly, his hand came up and covered hers where it rested against his cheek. You're too stubborn to give up, aren't you? Always have been. Something that might have been a smile crossed his frozen face. Thank heaven for that. The other men recovered faster than Callum. They'd been slightly less exposed, but Callum had given them his extra blanket, his portion of food, everything he had to keep them alive. It had nearly killed him. Mercy stayed with him through the night, forcing warm liquids down his throat and watching for signs of pneumonia. Around dawn, he finally fell into real sleep. She sat back and looked at him. His face was bruised and weather-beaten, his hands wrapped in bandages where frostbite had damaged the fingers. But he was alive. Dutch appeared in the doorway. "How is he?" "He'll make it. Probably lose a couple fingers, though. Better than losing his life." Dutch sat down heavily. "We're in bad shape, Mercy. Real bad. Even with the boss back, I don't know how we recover from this." "We will, though. Your faith is admirable, but faith doesn't feed cattle or buy supplies." Mercy didn't have an answer for that. He was right. The situation was desperate. They'd barely survived the storm. Winter was just beginning, and they had nothing left. But giving up wasn't an option. Not for her. Not ever. The next morning, Sam found the deer. It was frozen solid in a drift about 100 yards from the house, perfectly preserved by the cold. One shot to the heart, probably died early in the storm. "It's a miracle," Tommy breathed. Dutch shook his head in wonder. "Enough meat to feed us for weeks if we're careful." They butchered it immediately, storing the frozen meat in the barn. That night they had the first real meal in a week. Mercy cooked venison stew with the last of the potatoes, and everyone ate like they'd forgotten what food tasted like. Callum sat at the table wrapped in blankets, his bandaged hands awkward around the spoon. But he ate, and for the first time since coming back, his eyes had some life in them. "We're going to be all right," he said quietly. Mercy looked at him. "I know." "How?" "Because we're still here, still fighting. Hayes isn't." The name hung heavy in the air. Hayes, who'd laughed at Mercy when she first arrived. Hayes, who'd thanked her for saving his life during the fever. Hayes, who'd died alone in the snow looking for cattle. "No," Mercy agreed. "He's not. And that's awful. But we honor him by surviving, by making sure his death wasn't for nothing." Callum was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You're right." After dinner, Mercy found him standing at the window, staring out at the moonlit snow. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Thinking about spring, about rebuilding." He didn't look at her. "About whether it's even worth trying." "It's worth it." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She moved beside him. "Because you're worth it. This ranch is worth it. All of it." He turned to face her. "You really believe that?" "I wouldn't still be here if I didn't." They stood there inches apart, close enough that Mercy could feel the warmth of him, could see the way his eyes searched her face like he was trying to memorize it. "Mercy," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart was racing. "What?" He stopped, looked away. "Never mind. It's not important." "Callum, you should get some rest. It's been a long day." He walked away before she could respond, leaving Mercy standing alone at the window wondering what he'd been about to say. The days after the storm were brutal. They dug out the ranch slowly, clearing paths to the barn and bunkhouse, surveying the damage. It was worse than they'd feared. 20 cattle dead. The chicken coop collapsed. Half the hay supply ruined by water damage. But they were alive. And as long as they were alive, there was hope. Mercy threw herself into work, cooking, cleaning, helping wherever she could. The garden was buried under 4 feet of snow, but come spring she'd rebuild it. Bigger this time. Better. Noah had grown quieter since the storm. He'd been scared, Mercy knew. They all had. But he was tougher now, too. Helped with chores without being asked. Took care of his sister. And Eliza. Eliza was changing, too. She still didn't speak, but she watched everything with those serious dark eyes. Learning, absorbing, waiting for something. One evening, Mercy was preparing dinner when Eliza appeared at her elbow. She tugged on Mercy's sleeve and pointed to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the snow-covered prairie. The sky was on fire. Orange and pink and gold. Beautiful in a way that made your chest ache. "It's pretty, isn't it?" Mercy said. Eliza nodded, then so quietly Mercy almost missed it, she spoke. "Pretty." Mercy froze. The wooden spoon fell from her hand and clattered on the floor. "What did you say, baby?" Eliza looked up at her with wide eyes. "Pretty," she repeated, louder this time, clear as a bell. Mercy dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms. She was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, it's so pretty. You're talking. Oh, baby, you're talking." Noah came running. "What happened? Why are you crying?" Your sister spoke. Eliza spoke. Noah's eyes went huge. Really? Eliza, say something else. But Eliza just buried her face in Mercy's shoulder, overwhelmed. That was okay. She'd spoken. After months of silence, she'd finally spoken. Mercy held her children and cried tears of joy for the first time since Thomas died. Callum found them like that a few minutes later. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Mercy wiped her eyes. Everything's right. Eliza spoke. His face softened. That's good. Real good. He crouched down to Eliza's level. Hey there, little one. It's nice to finally hear your voice. Eliza peeked at him shyly. Then she smiled. A real smile that lit up her whole face. Callum looked at Mercy, and something passed between them. Understanding, shared joy, something deeper that made Mercy's breath catch. Later, after the children were asleep, she found him outside staring at the stars. Can't stop thinking about Hayes, he admitted. About all the things I could have done different. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I'm the boss. I make the decisions. He died because of my decision to wait out the storm instead of trying to make it back earlier. You couldn't have known how bad it would get. That's the problem. I should have known. Should have felt it coming. He shook his head. I'm supposed to keep them safe. All of them. And I failed. Mercy moved closer. You're human, Callum. You can't control the weather. Can't predict everything. Hayes made his own choice to go out looking for cattle. That's on him, not you. Easy to say. It's the truth. She touched his arm. You did everything you could, gave them your blanket, your food, nearly died keeping them alive. If anyone's a hero here, it's you. He looked at her, really looked at her. How do you do it? Do what? Stay so strong. After everything you've been through. Losing your husband, coming to this place with nothing, nearly dying half a dozen times. How are you not broken? Mercy thought about it. I was broken. For a while after Thomas died, I was completely shattered. But then I had to choose, stay broken or rebuild. And I chose to rebuild. Not because I'm strong, because I didn't have any other choice. That's strength, though, real strength. Then you have it too. You just can't see it yet. Callum was quiet. Then very slowly, he reached out and took her hand. His bandaged fingers were clumsy, but his grip was firm. Thank you, he said, for everything. For saving my life, for keeping this ranch together when I couldn't, for... He swallowed hard. For being here. Mercy's heart was pounding. Where else would I be? Anywhere but this frozen hell. She squeezed his hand. This frozen hell is home now. I'm not going anywhere. They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, staring at the stars. And Mercy felt something she hadn't felt since Thomas died. Peace. Real, genuine peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with exactly the people you're meant to be with. Even if the road ahead was hard, even if winter lasted months longer, even if they lost everything, she was home. And that was enough. Winter dragged on with a cruelty that tested everyone's limits. January brought more storms, though none as devastating as the first. February froze the ground so hard that breaking ice on the water troughs became a morning ritual that left everyone's hands aching. But they survived. Day by brutal day, they survived. Callum lost 2 fingers on his left hand to frostbite. The doctor who finally made it out in late January took one look and shook his head. Should have come off weeks ago. You're lucky it didn't spread. Mercy held Callum's good hand while the doctor worked. He didn't make a sound, just gripped her fingers tight enough to hurt. When it was over, he looked at his bandaged hand with an expression she couldn't read. Well, he said finally, at least I've still got my trigger finger. The attempt at humor fell flat, but Mercy appreciated it anyway. His recovery was slow and he hated every minute of it. Hated being unable to work, hated depending on others, hated the weakness. Mercy caught him trying to saddle a horse one-handed 3 days after the surgery and physically blocked his path. Absolutely not. I need to check the south fence. Dutch already did. You need to rest. I've been resting for days. 3 days. After nearly dying. That's not enough. Callum's jaw tightened. Don't treat me like an invalid. Then don't act like a stubborn fool who's going to get himself killed. They stared at each other. Mercy refused to back down. Finally, Callum made a frustrated sound and stalked away. Dutch, watching from the barn, chuckled. You're the only person on this ranch who can talk to him like that. Someone has to. True enough. But most people value their lives too much to try. Mercy went back to her work, but she was smiling slightly. Arguing with Callum had become almost comfortable. Familiar. Like they'd been doing it for years instead of months. As winter slowly released its grip, the ranch began to recover. The remaining cattle were thin but alive. The men repaired damage from the storms. Mercy planned her garden obsessively, drawing diagrams and making lists of what to plant where. Noah turned 8 in March. They had a small celebration with a cake Mercy made from carefully hoarded sugar and eggs. Callum carved him a new wooden horse to replace the one his father had made, which had finally broken beyond repair. Noah's face lit up when he saw it. "This is even better than my old one." "Don't tell your pa I said this," Callum said quietly, "but I'm a better carver than he was." Noah laughed. It was the first time Mercy had heard him really laugh since Thomas died. The sound made her eyes sting. Eliza was talking more now, not constantly, but in careful, measured sentences that showed she'd been listening all along. She had opinions about everything from what to plant in the garden to which chickens were the meanest. "That brown one pecked me," she announced one morning, pointing at a hen. "She's a bully." "Then we'll have to watch out for her," Mercy agreed. "Or eat her," Eliza said matter-of-factly. Mercy and Callum exchanged glances across the table. He was trying not to smile. "Maybe we'll give her one more chance," Mercy suggested. "Okay, but if she pecks me again, she's dinner." This time Callum did smile, a real one that changed his whole face. Spring arrived in fits and starts. Warm days followed by freezing nights. Snow melting into mud that sucked at boots and made everything harder. But slowly, steadily, the world came back to life. The first crocuses appeared in late March. Mercy found them blooming near the fence and felt absurdly emotional about it. Flowers. Actual flowers after months of nothing but white and brown and gray. She was kneeling beside them when Callum found her. "You're crying over flowers. They're beautiful. They're weeds. They're survivors, like us." She looked up at him. Everything that makes it through winter is a miracle. He helped her to her feet, his good hand warm around hers. "Then I guess we're miracles too." "I guess we are." They stood there looking at each other, and Mercy felt that same charge in the air. The thing that had been building between them for months, getting stronger every day. She wanted to ask what it meant, where it was going, if she was reading things wrong. But she was afraid of the answer. Or maybe afraid of the question. Callum cleared his throat. "Garden should be ready to plant soon. Another week or two. You've done good work on it. Better than I thought possible." Was that almost a compliment? Don't let it go to your head. But he was smiling again as he walked away. April brought warmth and rain. The prairie exploded with wildflowers, purple and yellow and white stretching as far as the eye could see. Mercy started planting the garden and the whole ranch pitched in. Even Callum spent an afternoon helping dig rows, working awkwardly with his injured hand but refusing to quit. By the end of the month, they had vegetables sprouting and the promise of a real harvest come summer. Mercy walked through the rows each evening, checking on everything, marveling at green shoots pushing up through dark soil. Life. Real, stubborn, beautiful life. One warm evening, she was watering the tomato plants when she heard horses approaching. She looked up and saw 3 riders she didn't recognize. They looked rough, trail-worn and hard-eyed. Mercy straightened slowly, keeping the water bucket between herself and them. "Help you, gentlemen?" The one in front smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Looking for Callum Vane. He around?" "Who's asking?" "Name's Porter. Did some business with Vane few years back. Heard he had a rough winter. Thought I'd check in." Something about the way he said it made Mercy's skin crawl. She glanced toward the barn where she knew Dutch was working. "Mr. Vane's not here right now." "That's so. Where'd he go?" "Not sure it's your business." Porter's smile vanished. "You got a mouth on you, don't you? Someone should teach you some manners." "Try it and see what happens." The voice came from behind Mercy. She turned and saw Callum standing there with a rifle cradled in his good arm. His face was completely calm, but his eyes were ice. Porter's expression shifted. "Vane, there you are. Just came by to talk business." "Don't recall doing business with you, Porter." "Sure you do. That land deal back in '63. The one where you tried to cheat me out of 200 acres? Yeah, I remember. What do you want? Heard you lost cattle in the blizzard. Heard you're struggling. Porter leaned forward in his saddle. I'm prepared to make an offer on your ranch. Fair price. Cash money. Not interested. You haven't heard my price yet. Don't need to. Ranch isn't for sale. Be smart, Vane. You can't recover from this. Too much damage, not enough cattle. Take the money while you can. Callum's finger moved to the trigger. I said no. Now get off my land before I give you 3 new holes to breathe through. Porter's face darkened. This is a mistake. You'll regret it. I've regretted plenty of things in my life. Keeping my ranch won't be one of them. The 3 men sat there for another moment, tension crackling in the air. Then Porter spat in the dirt and turned his horse. Your funeral, Vane. They rode off. Mercy waited until they were out of sight before letting out the breath she'd been holding. What was that about? Vultures. Callum lowered the rifle. Waiting for people to fail so they can pick over the remains. Porter's been trying to get this land for years. Is he right? About us not being able to recover? Callum looked at her. You tell me. You're the one who keeps saying we'll figure it out. We will. Then there's your answer. He started to leave, then stopped. Thank you for not telling him I was here. Of course. You could have. Made things simpler. Sold the ranch, taken your share, gone somewhere easier. Mercy shook her head. This is home. I'm not leaving. Something shifted in his expression. No, I don't think you are. That night Mercy couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Porter's words, about how close they were to losing everything. The ranch was barely holding together. One more disaster, and they'd go under. She was sitting at the kitchen table drinking cold coffee when Callum appeared. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much on my mind. He poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. They'd done this dozens of times now, late-night conversations when the rest of the ranch was asleep, talking about everything and nothing. You worried about Porter? He asked. A little, are you? Porter's a snake, but he's not stupid. He won't try anything direct, not worth the risk. Callum was quiet for a moment. I am worried about the ranch, though. He's not wrong that we're in trouble. How bad? Bad. We need to rebuild the herd, but cattle cost money we don't have. Need to repair the barn before it collapses. Need new equipment. The list goes on. What if we sell something? The south pasture, maybe? Callum shook his head. Sell land and we're one step closer to losing the whole ranch. That's what Porter wants. For us to get desperate and start selling pieces until there's nothing left. Then what do? Work harder. Pray for luck. Hope nothing else goes wrong. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. Mercy reached across the table and took his hand. His damaged one, still healing. He didn't pull away. We'll make it, she said. You really believe that? I have to. The alternative is giving up, and I didn't survive this winter to give up now. Callum turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. I don't know what I did to deserve you showing up here, but I'm glad you did. Mercy's heart was hammering. Callum, let me finish. I've been trying to say this for weeks, and I keep chickening out. He took a breath. When you first arrived, I thought you were just another burden, another person I'd have to take care of who'd leave as soon as things got hard. But you didn't leave. You stayed. You fought. You saved my men, saved me, saved this whole damn ranch. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as a burden and started seeing you as a... He struggled for words. As necessary. As essential. As the best thing that's happened to this place in years. Mercy couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you to stay. Not as a worker, not as someone earning their keep, as family, as... He swallowed hard. I'm not good at this. Sarah was the romantic one. I'm just a busted-up rancher with more problems than solutions. But I care about you, Mercy. A lot. And I think maybe you care about me, too. I do, she whispered. I care about you so much it scares me. Why does it scare you? Because I lost Thomas, and it nearly destroyed me. If I let myself love you and then lose you, you won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. No. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay alive. Because I want to see where this goes, you and me, if you'll give me a chance. Mercy looked at their joined hands. At his face. scarred and weathered but honest, at the future stretching out, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. "Yes," she said, "I'll give you a chance." Callum's smile was like sunrise. He stood up and pulled her to her feet, then kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper. Mercy melted into him, feeling safer than she had in years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Callum rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we keep fighting. Together." Together. I like the sound of that. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Callum stepped back reluctantly. "I should let you sleep. I'm not tired anymore." "Good. Because I need to show you something." He led her outside into the barn. Inside, pushed into the corner, was her old broken trunk from the day she arrived, the one that had cracked when it hit the ground. Mercy stared. "I thought that was thrown out." "I fixed it." Callum ran his hand over the wood. "Took me months working on it between other jobs. Had to replace half the boards. But it's solid now, strong." "Why?" "Because it mattered to you, because it was one of the last things you had from your old life, and because—" He looked at her. "Because broken things can be repaired if you care enough to do the work." Mercy felt tears sting her eyes. Callum Vane, "Are you a romantic?" "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." She laughed and kissed him again. The next morning, the whole ranch knew something had changed. Mercy saw it in the way the hands grinned at her and Callum, in the way Dutch winked when they came to breakfast together. "About damn time," Sam muttered. Callum shot him a look. "You got something to say?" "Nope, not a thing, boss." But he was smiling. The weeks that followed were busy and hard, but different somehow. Better. Mercy and Callum worked side by side rebuilding the ranch. He taught Noah to ride properly, spending patient hours in the corral showing him how to sit, how to hold the reins. Mercy watched them and felt her heart expand. He was good with children, patient in a way she wouldn't have expected from such a hard man. One evening, she found him in the barn carving something. When she got closer, she saw it was a small wooden rabbit. "For Eliza?" she asked. She mentioned she liked the rabbits in the garden, thought she might like one she could keep. Mercy sat beside him and watched him work. His hands were skilled despite missing 2 fingers. The rabbit was taking shape beautifully. "You're good at this." "Had a lot of time to practice. Winter nights get long." He glanced at her. "Used to make things for Sarah. And for the baby that never got to be born." It was the first time he'd mentioned them directly. Mercy stayed quiet, letting him talk. "I thought I'd never care about anyone again after they died. Seemed safer that way, less chance of getting hurt." He set down the carving and looked at her. "But then you showed up and ruined everything. Is that good or bad?" "It's terrifying and wonderful, and I wouldn't change it for anything." Mercy kissed him softly. "Me neither." That night at dinner, Callum cleared his throat. Everyone looked up. "Got an announcement," he said. "Asked Mrs. Hollow to stay on permanent, as family. Wanted you all to know." There was a moment of silence. Then Tommy whooped and the whole table erupted in cheers. Dutch stood up and shook Callum's hand. "Congratulations, boss. You landed yourself a good woman." "Don't I know it?" Mercy felt her face burning, but she was smiling. Noah and Eliza looked confused. "Does this mean we really get to stay?" Noah asked. "Forever," Callum said. "If that's all right with you." Noah grinned. "That's all right with me." Eliza climbed into Callum's lap without hesitation. He stiffened in surprise, then carefully wrapped his arm around her. "You're nice," she announced. "I like you." "I like you too, little one." Mercy felt tears threatening again. Her children had accepted him. More than accepted. They were happy. That night after the kids were asleep, Callum found Mercy in the garden. The plants were growing strong now, tomatoes already forming on the vines. "Beautiful night," he said. "It is." He pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden box. "What's this?" Mercy asked. "Open it." Inside was a ring, simple silver band with a small blue stone. "It was my mother's," Callum said. "Only thing I have left of her. I want you to have it." Mercy's hands were shaking. "Callum, marry me, Mercy. I know it's fast. I know we've only really been courting a few weeks, but I'm not getting any younger and I don't want to waste time. I want you as my wife, want to raise those kids together, want to build something real and lasting." He took the ring and held it up. "What do you say?" Mercy looked at him, at this hard, damaged, beautiful man who'd given her everything when she had nothing, who'd become home in a way she never expected. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her under the prairie stars while the garden they'd built together grew around them. They set the wedding for June. Mercy wanted to wait for the garden to bloom and for the ranch to be more settled. Callum would have married her the next day, but agreed to wait. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and work. The ranch hands pitched in to make repairs and clean things up. Sam and Tommy even attempted to build an arbor for the ceremony, though it collapsed twice before they got it right. Mercy sewed herself a new dress from fabric Dutch picked up in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and pretty, pale blue that matched the stone in her ring. Travelers started arriving as word spread. A family from a neighboring ranch, the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. Even a few townsfolk who'd heard about the widow and the rancher and wanted to see for themselves. The morning of the wedding, Mercy woke up terrified. Not of marrying Callum, she wanted that more than anything, but of what it meant, starting over, risking her heart again, trusting that this time wouldn't end in tragedy. Dutch found her sitting outside staring at nothing. "Getting cold feet?" he asked. "No, just scared." "Understandable. But that man loves you, really loves you, and you love him. That's rare. Don't let fear rob you of it. What if something happens to him? What if nothing does? What if you get 50 good years together?" Dutch sat beside her. "You can't live your life preparing for the worst. Sometimes you gotta hope for the best." Mercy nodded slowly. He was right. She couldn't let Thomas's death dictate the rest of her life. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They stood under the arbor Sam and Tommy had finally managed to build properly, surrounded by everyone from the ranch and the handful of guests who'd come. Noah stood proudly as ring bearer. Eliza scattered wildflowers from the prairie. The preacher said the words, and Callum repeated them, his voice steady and sure. When it was Mercy's turn, she looked into his eyes and meant every word. "I do." Callum kissed her, and everyone cheered. Someone started playing a fiddle, and couples began dancing in the dusty yard. It wasn't fancy or elegant, but it was real. Joyful in a way Mercy had forgotten was possible. She danced with Callum, then with Dutch, then with each of the ranch hands. Noah tried to dance with Eliza, and they both collapsed giggling. Mercy watched them and felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was home. As the sun set, Callum pulled her away from the party and led her to the garden. The vegetables were thriving, flowers blooming along the edges. "You did this," he said, "brought life to dead ground. We did it. Together. No. This was you. You're the heart of this ranch, Mercy. Always have been." She leaned into him, and they stood there watching the stars come out. From the house they could hear music and laughter, her children playing, her new husband's arms around her. Mercy thought about the terrified widow who'd stepped off that stagecoach months ago with nothing but desperate hope. That woman felt like a stranger now. "What are you thinking?" Callum asked. "That I'm happy. Really, truly happy. For the first time since Thomas died." "Good. That's all I want, to make you happy." "You do. You really do." They stayed like that until the party wound down and the guests began leaving. Then they walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to start their life together. The frontier had tried to break Mercy Hollow, had thrown everything at her: loss, poverty, starvation, freezing cold, exhaustion, and fear. But she'd survived it all. And in surviving, she'd built something stronger than anything she'd lost: a home, a family, a love that felt like it could withstand anything. And as she lay beside her new husband that night, listening to him breathe, Mercy knew one thing for certain. She was exactly where she belonged. Marriage didn't magically solve their problems. Mercy learned that quickly enough. The ranch was still struggling financially, the herd was still too small, and Porter's threats still hung over them like storm clouds. But now she had someone fighting beside her instead of facing it all alone. That made all the difference. Summer arrived hot and dry. The garden flourished despite the heat, producing more vegetables than Mercy had dared hope for. Tomatoes ripened on the vine, beans climbed their trellises, squash sprawled across the ground like green invasions. She and Eliza spent hours harvesting and preserving, filling jars that would feed them through the next winter. "Look how many we have, Mama," Eliza said, counting the jars lined up on the shelf. 23 tomatoes, 15 beans, 12 pickles. "We'll need more," Mercy said. "A lot more if we're going to make it through winter without buying from town." "Then we'll make more." Eliza picked up another jar with complete confidence. Mercy smiled. Her daughter had come so far from the silent, traumatized child who'd arrived at the ranch. Now she talked constantly, asked questions about everything, and worked alongside Mercy with steady determination. She was still quiet sometimes, still retreated into herself when things got overwhelming. But she was healing. They both were. Noah had grown into a competent ranch hand despite being only 8. He could rope a fence post from 10 feet away, could saddle his own horse, and took his responsibilities seriously. Too seriously sometimes. Mercy found him in the barn one afternoon looking exhausted. "What's wrong, baby?" "I'm not a baby anymore, Mama. I'm the man of the family." Mercy's heart squeezed. "Where'd you get that idea?" "That's what I'm supposed to be, right? Since Pa died." She knelt down to his level. "Noah, listen to me. You're 8 years old. You don't have to be the man of anything. You just have to be a kid." "But what about you and Eliza? Who takes care of you?" "I take care of us, and now Callum does too. That's his job, not yours." "But what if something happens to him? What if he leaves like Pa did?" So that was the real fear. Mercy pulled Noah into her arms and held him tight. "Your Pa didn't leave us. He died. That's different. And Callum's not going anywhere. He's tough as nails and too stubborn to die. Trust me on that." "You promise?" "I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep this family safe. But you need to let yourself be a kid while you still can. There'll be plenty of time to be grown up later." Noah nodded against her shoulder. "Okay, Mama. Now go play with the horses or something. That's an order." He managed a small smile and ran off. Mercy watched him go and felt the weight of motherhood settle heavier on her shoulders. Keeping her children fed and safe was one thing. Healing their emotional wounds was something else entirely. That evening she mentioned it to Callum while they were checking the cattle. "Noah thinks he has to be the man of the family." Callum frowned. "You say that?" "Practically word for word." "I'll talk to him. Make sure he knows that's my job now, not his. Don't be too hard on him. He's just scared." "I know. Lost his father, came to a strange place, nearly starved during the winter. Kid's been through more than most grown men." Callum was quiet for a moment. "I'll handle it right." And he did. Mercy watched him pull Noah aside the next day and have a long conversation. She couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Noah's shoulders relax, saw him actually smile. When they came back, Noah looked lighter somehow. "We good?" Mercy asked Callum quietly. "We're good. Told him he's got one job. Being a kid. Everything else is on us adults." "What'd he say?" "Asked if he could still help with the horses. I said, of course, long as it doesn't interfere with being 8 years old." Callum smiled slightly. "Smart kid. Reminds me of myself at that age. That's either very good or very concerning. Probably both." Life settled into a rhythm through July and August. Wake before dawn, work until you couldn't see straight, collapse into bed and do it again the next day. It was hard, but it was good. The kind of hard that built something instead of just tearing you down. The ranch hands had fully accepted Mercy as the boss's wife and treated her with a respect that still surprised her sometimes. They asked her opinion on things, deferred to her judgment, and protected her fiercely when strangers came around, which happened more often than Mercy liked. Porter had spread word that the Vane Ranch was failing, and vultures kept circling. Men offering to buy land for pennies on the dollar, cattle buyers trying to lowball them. Even a banker from town who showed up with foreclosure papers that turned out to be fake. Callum ran them all off with varying degrees of politeness. The banker got the rifle. The cattle buyers got threatened. Porter himself showed up in August and got both. "Last chance, Vane," Porter said from the safety of his horse. "Sell now or lose everything. Get off my land before I shoot you for trespassing. You can't hold out forever. Everyone knows you're one disaster away from collapse." "Then I guess we'll see what happens." Callum raised the rifle slightly. "Now move before I decide you're worth the bullet." Porter left, but his words stuck with Mercy. They were one disaster away from collapse, one bad storm, one cattle disease, one anything, and they'd lose it all. She was lying awake that night worrying when Callum rolled over. "I can hear you thinking from here. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I was already awake worrying about the same things you're worrying about." He pulled her closer. "Porter's right. We're hanging on by our fingernails." "So what do we do?" "Keep hanging on. It's all we can do." "That's not much of a plan." "It's the only plan we've got." Mercy was quiet for a moment. "What if we diversified?" "What?" "Right now we're dependent on cattle, but what if we added other income sources? The garden produces more than we need. We could sell vegetables in town. And I've been thinking about offering healing services. People come asking for help with sick children, injuries, all sorts of things. What if I charged for it?" Callum sat up. "That could work. The garden's producing like crazy, and everyone knows your remedies saved half the territory during the fever. It's not much, but it's something. It's more than we had yesterday." He kissed her forehead. "You're brilliant. You know that?" "I'm desperate. Desperation makes people creative." They started small. Mercy loaded a wagon with vegetables and took it to town with Dutch. She set up near the general store, and within 2 hours had sold everything. People were hungry for fresh produce and willing to pay. "This could really work," Dutch said on the ride back, "especially if you keep producing like you have been." "We'll need more garden space and help harvesting." "I'll talk to the boys. We can expand the plots behind the barn." Word spread about Mercy's healing skills, too. A rancher's wife came seeking help for a child with croup. Mercy treated the boy, and he recovered. The grateful mother told everyone who'd listen. Soon people were showing up at the ranch asking for Mercy specifically. She charged what seemed fair, sometimes cash, sometimes trade. A chicken for setting a broken arm. A bolt of fabric for treating an infection. Whatever people could afford. The money wasn't much, but it added up. Enough to buy supplies they desperately needed. Enough to feel like maybe, possibly, they might actually survive this. September brought cooler weather and a problem Mercy hadn't anticipated. A young woman showed up at the ranch looking for work. Her name was Catherine, and she was maybe 20, pretty in a delicate way that made Mercy immediately defensive. "I heard you needed help with the harvest," Catherine said. "I'm a hard worker. I can cook, clean, work the garden, whatever you need." Mercy wanted to say no, wanted to send this too pretty girl away before she became a complication. But they did need help. The garden was too much for just her and Eliza to manage. "All right, you can stay in the bunkhouse with the other hands. Same pay, same rules." Catherine's face lit up. "Thank you, ma'am. You won't regret this." Mercy already regretted it, but she kept that to herself. Catherine turned out to be a good worker, fast and efficient and uncomplaining. But she also had a way of laughing at everything Callum said, of touching his arm when she talked to him, of looking at him like he hung the moon. Mercy noticed, and hated that she noticed. "You're being ridiculous," she told herself one evening while aggressively chopping vegetables. "He's married to you. He chose you." "Who are you talking to?" Eliza asked from the doorway. "Myself, apparently. I'm losing my mind." "Is it because of Catherine?" Mercy stopped chopping. "What?" "The pretty lady who looks at Callum all the time. Is she making you mad?" Out of the mouths of 9-year-olds. "No, baby. I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look like you want to hit something." "Well, I'm not going to hit anything. That would be inappropriate." Eliza shrugged. "If you say so." That night, Mercy brought it up to Callum as casually as she could manage. "Catherine seems to be working out well." "Yeah, she's a good worker." "She seems to like you." Callum looked up from the ledger he'd been studying. "What?" "Catherine, she likes you. Haven't you noticed?" "Noticed what?" "Men could be so oblivious." "The way she looks at you, talks to you, touches you." Understanding dawned on Callum's face. "Mercy, are you jealous?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." She felt her face heat up. "It's stupid. I know it's stupid. But seeing her with you makes me—" "Makes you what?" "Scared. That you'll realize you made a mistake marrying me. That you could have had someone younger, prettier, less complicated." Callum stood up and crossed to her. He took her face in his hands and made her look at him. "Listen to me. I don't want younger. I don't want prettier. I don't want uncomplicated. I want you. Exactly you. The stubborn, brilliant, infuriating woman who saved my life and my ranch and gave me a reason to keep going. You understand?" "But she's nothing. She's nothing compared to you. And if she's making you uncomfortable, I'll send her away tomorrow. No, we need the help. I'm just being insecure. You're being human, and I love you for it. He kissed her softly. But you don't ever have to worry about me wanting someone else. You're it for me, Mercy. You're everything. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it quieted. And the next day, when Callum made a point of calling Mercy my beautiful wife in front of Catherine, she felt better. Catherine got the message and backed off. She was still a good worker, but she stopped the flirting. Mercy felt guilty for being relieved. October arrived with the first frost. The garden began dying back, and they harvested everything that was left. The cellar was packed with preserved food, more than Mercy had thought possible when she first started digging in that frozen dirt. Look at all this, Dutch said, surveying the shelves. We'll eat like kings this winter. We'll eat, Mercy corrected. That's all I care about. But she was proud. This represented months of backbreaking work, proof that they could survive. The ranch was in better shape too. They'd managed to buy 6 new cattle with the money from Mercy's vegetables and healing work. Not enough to rebuild the herd, but a start. The fences were repaired. The barn had a new roof. Small victories, but they added up. One evening in late October, Callum gathered everyone in the main house. His face was serious. Got news from town. Porter's been arrested. Everyone started talking at once. Dutch whistled low. What for? Fraud. Turns out those land deals he was pushing weren't legal. He didn't own half the property he was selling. The law finally caught up with him. Callum looked around the room. Which means he's not a threat anymore. One less thing to worry about. Sam raised his coffee cup. Here's to the law actually working for once. They all drank to that. Mercy felt relief wash over her. Porter had been a constant source of anxiety. Knowing he was gone made everything feel lighter. That night, she and Callum sat on the porch watching the stars. We might actually make it, she said quietly. What happened to we will make it? Where'd all that confidence go? It's still here, just acknowledging that it was never guaranteed. Callum took her hand. Nothing in life is guaranteed except death and hard work. But I'll tell you what I think. I think we're going to do more than survive. I think we're going to build something that lasts, something our kids can inherit and be proud of. Our kids? Noah and Eliza. They're mine now too, aren't they? Mercy's throat tightened. Yes, they are. Then they're our kids. And this is their ranch as much as ours. She leaned her head on his shoulder. When did you get so sentimental? Right around the time I married you. You're a bad influence. The worst. They sat in comfortable silence while the prairie wind whispered through the grass. Mercy thought about the terrified widow who'd stood in this exact spot 10 months ago with nothing but hope and determination. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime. November brought the first snow. Not a blizzard this time, just a gentle dusting that made everything look clean and new. Noah and Eliza ran outside shrieking with joy, throwing snowballs and making snow angels. Mercy watched them from the kitchen window while kneading bread dough. They're happy, Callum said, coming up behind her. They are. Really happy. I wasn't sure that would ever be possible again after Thomas died. Kids are resilient, and they've got a good life here. Hard, but good. Do you think we're doing right by them? Raising them out here instead of somewhere civilized? Define civilized. You mean cities where kids work in factories and breathe coal smoke and never see the sky? Where people live stacked on top of each other and half of them are starving? Callum shook his head. No, thank you. Out here they've got space to run, clean air to breathe, and work that means something. Could be worse. He was right. Mercy had seen enough of city poverty to know the frontier offered things money couldn't buy. Freedom, purpose, the chance to build something with your own hands. The holidays approached and Mercy threw herself into preparations. She wanted to give the children a real Christmas. Their first one without Thomas had been spent in the awful shed, eating cold beans and trying not to freeze. This year would be different. She made cookies with Eliza, using precious sugar they'd bought with vegetable money. She helped Noah carve a whistle for Callum out of willow wood. She even convinced Dutch to find a small pine tree they could decorate. Christmas morning arrived cold and clear. The children woke up to find simple presents waiting. New clothes Mercy had sewn, wooden toys Callum had carved, books Dutch had ordered from town. Noah got a real pocket knife. Eliza got a doll with a china face. This is the best Christmas ever, Eliza announced, hugging her doll. Better than last year? Mercy asked. Last year was sad. This year is happy. Simple as that. Children had a way of cutting through complications. They had a feast for dinner, venison roasted with vegetables from the cellar, bread with real butter, even a pie made from preserved berries. The ranch hands joined them, and the house rang with laughter and stories. Mercy looked around the crowded table and felt something settle in her chest. Contentment, maybe, or peace. The understanding that this was enough. This messy, imperfect, hard-won life was more than enough. After dinner, Callum pulled her aside. I have something for you. We agreed no presents. I lied. He handed her a small package wrapped in cloth. Inside were seeds. Dozens of packets of seeds for flowers she'd never heard of. Roses, lilacs, hollyhocks, daisies. For your garden, Callum said. Dutch ordered them special from back east. Figured you could use some beauty mixed in with all those vegetables. Mercy felt tears sting her eyes. This is perfect. This is... She couldn't finish. You're crying. Is that good or bad? Good. Very good. She kissed him hard enough that someone whistled from the dining room. Winter settled in, but it was gentler than the year before. They had food, fuel, and each other. The storms that came were manageable. The cold was bearable. They'd learned from the previous year's mistakes and prepared better. January passed uneventfully. February brought a brief scare when Tommy got sick, but Mercy treated him and he recovered quickly. March arrived with the first hints of thaw. And then, in early April, something happened that nobody expected. Mercy was planting the first seeds of spring, lettuce and peas that could handle the cold, when Eliza came running from the house. Mama! Mama! Come quick! Mercy's heart jumped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something good. Come see. She followed Eliza to the barn where Noah stood, looking at something in the corner stall. When Mercy got closer, she saw what had them so excited. Rex, Callum's horse, had a new foal, a tiny chestnut filly with wobbly legs and huge dark eyes. When did this happen? Mercy asked. Just now. We were checking on Rex, and she was having the baby, and we watched the whole thing. Noah's eyes were shining. It was amazing, Mama. We saw new life being born. Mercy knelt beside her children, and they watched the filly try to stand. She fell twice before managing to stay upright long enough to nurse. She's beautiful, Eliza whispered. She is, Mercy agreed. Callum appeared in the doorway. Heard we had a new arrival. Look, Eliza pointed. Isn't she perfect? Pretty close to it. Callum came over and examined the filly with a critical eye. Good bone structure, strong legs. She'll make a fine horse. Can I name her? Noah asked. Don't see why not. Hope. I want to name her Hope. Mercy's throat tightened. Hope. After everything they'd been through, her son wanted to name the new foal Hope. I think that's perfect, she managed to say. That night at dinner, Noah couldn't stop talking about the birth, about how amazing it was to see life beginning, about how Hope was going to grow up strong and fast and be the best horse on the ranch. Mercy listened and felt something profound settle in her chest. This was what survival looked like, not just making it through disasters and hardship, but getting to the other side where new life was possible, where hope wasn't just a word but something real and tangible with 4 legs and a silky coat. Spring arrived in full force. The garden burst into life with vegetables and now flowers, too. Mercy had planted the seeds Callum gave her, and they were already sprouting. In a few months, there would be color everywhere. More travelers began arriving as the weather improved. Some were heading west to try their luck in California. Others were just drifters looking for work. And increasingly, people came specifically to see Mercy. A woman rode 3 days to get treatment for her daughter's persistent cough. A rancher from 50 miles away brought his father who'd been injured in a fall. Word had spread that there was a healer on the Vane Ranch who could work miracles. Mercy didn't think she worked miracles. She just paid attention, used what her mother had taught her, and cared enough to try. But people called it miraculous anyway. The income from healing and vegetables was steady now, enough that Callum could buy more cattle, enough to hire 2 additional hands for the summer, enough to finally feel like they weren't one disaster away from ruin. We should expand the house, Callum said one evening. Add rooms. Make it bigger. Why? Because we're going to need the space. The ranch is growing. We're growing. Makes sense to have a house that reflects that. So they built an addition with 2 new bedrooms and a proper bathing room. It took all summer, but by August they had a house that felt like a real home instead of a place they were just surviving in. Eliza got her own room and decorated it with wildflowers and the wooden animals Callum had carved. Noah's room had shelves for his growing collection of rocks and interesting bones. Mercy and Callum's room had a real bed frame instead of just a mattress on the floor. Small luxuries that meant everything. One September afternoon, Mercy was working in the garden when she heard Eliza call her name. Not urgently, just happily. She looked up and saw her daughter running toward her with something in her hands. "Look what I found!" Eliza held up a butterfly, orange and black, perched on her finger. "Isn't it beautiful?" "It's gorgeous." "It landed on me and didn't fly away like it wanted to say hello." The butterfly sat there for another moment, then spread its wings and took flight. They watched it disappear into the prairie. "Everything comes back eventually," Eliza said thoughtfully. "The butterflies, the flowers, the warm weather. Even when you think they're gone forever, they come back." Mercy looked at her daughter and saw wisdom beyond her years. "You're right, they do come back. Like us. We came back too, from being sad." "Yes, baby, we did." Eliza hugged her quickly and ran off to chase another butterfly. Mercy stood there, feeling the weight of that simple truth. They had come back. From grief and loss and the kind of pain that should have destroyed them. But instead of breaking, they'd bent. And in bending, they'd found a way to keep growing. That night she told Callum what Eliza had said. "She's a smart kid, takes after her mother." "She takes after herself, both kids do. They're their own people now, not just extensions of me or memories of Thomas. Their own complete people." "That's good. That's how it should be." Mercy was quiet for a moment. "I don't think about Thomas as much anymore. Some days I don't think about him at all. Does that make me a bad person?" "No, it makes you someone who's moved forward with their life. There's no shame in that. I loved him. I want you to know that. I really loved him." "I know you did. And I love you. Those things can both be true at the same time." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "How'd you get so wise?" "Nearly dying teaches you what matters. And you matter. This life we're building matters. Everything else is just noise." As autumn arrived again, Mercy found herself taking stock of everything they'd accomplished. The ranch was thriving now, not just surviving, but actually prospering. They had a healthy herd, productive land, and a reputation that brought business from across the territory. The garden was legendary. People came from miles around to buy Mercy's vegetables and flowers. She'd trained Catherine to help with the healing work, and together they treated dozens of patients every month. The children were happy and healthy. Noah was almost 9 now, tall and gangly, and becoming more independent every day. Eliza had just turned 10 and was reading everything she could get her hands on, devouring books Dutch ordered from town. And Mercy herself had changed in ways she couldn't have imagined. She was stronger physically from the constant work. But more than that, she was stronger inside. The terrified widow had become a woman who knew her own worth, who could make hard decisions, who could survive anything the frontier threw at her. One October evening, the whole ranch gathered for dinner as usual. The table was crowded and loud with conversation. Dutch was telling a story about his younger days. Sam and Tommy were arguing good-naturedly about horses. Catherine was laughing at something one of the hands had said. Callum caught Mercy's eye across the table and smiled. A private smile meant just for her. Mercy smiled back and felt that same contentment from Christmas. This was her family, not the one she'd been born into or even the one she'd made with Thomas. This new family built from necessity and survival and choice. After dinner, Callum asked her to walk with him. They headed toward the garden, now dying back as winter approached. But Mercy could already see next year's potential, could see where she'd expand, what she'd plant differently, how she'd make it even better. "I've been thinking," Callum said. "Dangerous pastime." "Funny. I've been thinking we should make this official. The whole thing. Not just our marriage, but the ranch. Make you a full partner in the deed, equal ownership." Mercy stopped walking. "What?" "You've earned it. More than earned it. This place wouldn't exist without you. Feels wrong that your name's not on the paperwork." "Callum, She didn't know what to say. "Are you sure?" never been more sure of anything. He pulled papers from his pocket. Already had them drawn up in town. Just need your signature. Mercy took the papers with shaking hands, saw her name next to his. Mercy Vane, co-owner of the Vane Ranch. This is really mine? It's really ours, the way it should have been from the start. She signed the papers right there in the middle of the dying garden and felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just the wife anymore. Wasn't just the cook or the healer or the woman who'd shown up with nothing. She was a landowner, a partner, an equal. Winter came again, but this time Mercy wasn't afraid. They were prepared. They had food, fuel, supplies, and each other. The storms arrived and they weathered them. The cold came and they stayed warm. It was still hard, but it was manageable. And through it all, Mercy kept planning for spring. For the garden she'd expand even further. For the new cattle they'd buy. For all the ways they'd keep building and growing. One February morning, she woke up feeling strange. Not sick exactly, but off somehow. She made it through breakfast, but had to run outside halfway through to throw up. Callum found her leaning against the barn, looking pale. You all right? I think so. Must have eaten something bad. But it happened again the next morning. And the next. After a week of this, Mercy started to suspect. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like lightning. She stood in the kitchen, clutching the counter and feeling terror and joy war inside her chest. Another baby. Thomas's children had been miracles, but they'd also nearly killed her both times. Long, difficult pregnancies, even harder births. And that was when she was younger, healthier, not worn down by frontier life, but at the same time, a baby. Hers and Callum's, a symbol of this new life they'd built together. She told him that night after the children were asleep. I'm pregnant. Callum went very still. You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor. All the signs are there. How do you feel about it? Terrified. Happy. Both at the same time. She looked at him. How do you feel? The same. I lost Sarah and our baby. The thought of going through that again, he swallowed hard. But the thought of a child with you, our child, that's everything. So we're doing this. We're doing this. He pulled her close, and they stood there holding each other while their future rearranged itself around this new reality. The pregnancy was hard as Mercy had feared. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made her want to sleep 18 hours straight. Her body aching in ways it hadn't with Noah and Eliza. But she pushed through, kept working, kept healing people, kept managing the ranch alongside Callum. Catherine took over more of the garden work. The ranch hands helped with everything else. Dutch watched her like a hawk, ready to catch her if she fell. You need to rest more, Callum said constantly. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're exhausted. I'm pregnant. This is what pregnant feels like. I hate seeing you like this. Well, you should have thought of that before. She stopped. They both knew how babies were made. Complaining about it now was pointless. Summer arrived and Mercy's belly grew. The children were excited about having a sibling. Eliza spent hours planning what they'd teach the baby. Noah worried about whether there'd be enough room. We'll make room, Mercy assured him. There's always room for family. August came hot and miserable. Mercy was huge now, uncomfortable all the time, ready for this to be over. The baby kicked constantly, active and strong. Definitely your kid, she told Callum. Stubborn and won't stay still. Could be your kid. You're the stubborn one. We're both stubborn. Poor child doesn't stand a chance. But she smiled when she said it. The labor started on a Tuesday in late August. Mercy had been expecting it. She knew the signs. But knowing didn't make it easier. It was long and hard, and there were moments when she thought she might die. When the pain was so intense she couldn't see straight. When she wanted to give up. But she didn't give up. She'd survived too much to die now. 15 hours later, the baby arrived. A girl with dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. She's perfect, the midwife said, placing the baby in Mercy's arms. Mercy looked at her daughter and felt tears stream down her face. Perfect. Yes, absolutely perfect. Callum came in looking terrified. Is she? We're fine. We're both fine. Mercy held up the baby. Meet your daughter. He took the baby with shaking hands and just stared at her. Mercy saw tears in his eyes. She's so small. All babies are small. Not like this. He couldn't finish, just held his daughter and cried. Noah and Eliza came in next, crowding around to see their new sister. What's her name? Eliza asked. Mercy and Callum looked at each other. They discussed names, but never settled on one. Sarah, Callum said quietly. For my first wife, and Hope for her middle name. Sarah Hope Vane. Mercy's throat tightened. Naming the baby after Sarah was right. It honored what came before while celebrating what was now. Sarah Hope, she repeated. It's perfect. The ranch celebrated the birth with a feast. Everyone came by to see the baby and offer congratulations. Dutch carved a tiny wooden horse. Sam brought wildflowers. Even the quietest hand stopped by to peer at the tiny face and smile. Mercy recovered slowly. The birth had taken everything out of her, but she was alive. They were all alive. That was what mattered. She spent weeks just feeding Sarah and sleeping, letting her body heal. Catherine managed the healing work. Callum ran the ranch. The children helped where they could. And slowly, Mercy came back to herself. Stronger this time. Tested and proven. Fall arrived with its usual beauty. The prairie turned gold and brown. The air got crisp. And Mercy went back to work in the garden, Sarah strapped to her chest in a sling. You're supposed to be resting, Callum said, finding her pulling weeds one afternoon. I've rested enough. Time to get back to living. The garden can wait. No, it can't. Spring planting starts soon and I need to prepare. She stood up and stretched. Besides, I like it out here. It's peaceful. He helped her finish the work, the two of them side by side with their baby between them. And Mercy felt the truth of what she'd told Callum all those months ago during the blizzard. Fear changed nothing. So you kept fighting. They'd fought through winter and fever and starvation and loss. They'd fought through self-doubt and financial ruin and every obstacle the frontier threw at them. And they'd won. Not because they were special or lucky or blessed, but because they refused to quit. As winter approached again, Mercy took stock of everything they'd built. The thriving ranch, the legendary garden, the family that had grown beyond what she'd imagined possible, the life that felt rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. She thought about the widow who'd stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago with 2 traumatized children and nothing but desperate hope. That woman had been weak, broken, barely holding together. This woman was strong, whole, ready for whatever came next. One evening in December, Mercy stood in the garden, dormant now but already planned for spring. Snow was falling softly, coating everything in white. Behind her, the house glowed with lamplight, and she could hear laughter from inside. Her family. Her home. Callum came out and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. You'll freeze out here. Just thinking. About how far we've come. About everything we survived. She leaned back against him. About how the worst thing that ever happened to me led to the best life I could have imagined. You don't miss your old life? The city, the ease of it? No. That life was comfortable, but it was small. This life is hard, but it's huge. There's room to grow here, room to become something more than I was. Callum kissed the top of her head. You became something extraordinary. We both did. Together. They stood there watching the snow fall while their children played inside and their baby slept. And Mercy understood something fundamental about survival and strength and the human capacity to endure. You didn't survive by being fearless. You survived by being afraid and doing it anyway, by getting up every morning and choosing to keep going even when everything in you wanted to quit. The frontier hadn't broken her. Instead, it had forged her into something harder, sharper, more resilient than she'd ever been. It had taken a grieving widow with no skills and no future and transformed her into a landowner, a healer, a partner, a force to be reckoned with. And she'd done it by refusing to accept defeat, by turning dead ground into a garden, by saving lives instead of losing them, by building instead of mourning. The ranch that had started as a desperate last resort had become an empire, not of money or power, but of something more valuable, of loyalty and love, and the knowledge that they could survive anything as long as they faced it together. Mercy Vane, no longer hollow, that name belonged to someone else now, looked at her snow-covered garden, and smiled. Spring would come. It always did. And when it did, she'd be ready to make this garden bloom bigger and brighter than ever before. Because that's what survivors did. They took the broken pieces of their lives and built something beautiful from the ruins. They turned pain into strength, fear into courage, and endings into new beginnings. And they never, ever gave up.